Good morning, everyone. I hope your day is going well. I am honestly not sure how to introduce this video. 1 year ago today, the Five Nights at Freddy's movie dropped in theaters, and I had a fantastic time with it. I went to go see it with my then boyfriend, now husband, and we had a really amazing time. The movie is so clearly a love letter to the whole FNAF community, and it was just amazing to see how much support it got. Especially since it's a movie that we didn't think we were ever going to see because of all the production issues. The fact that it exists is a miracle, and I'm so glad it does. It was clearly made with nothing but love for the community, and it has a very special place in my heart for that reason. However, now that some time has passed, I think it's also safe to say that it is not a perfect movie. In fact, I think there's quite a few things that could be changed for the better. So I decided to try and make a video talking about that. This started as a review where I eventually give my suggestions for how it could be improved, but as time went on, the scope of the project just kept getting bigger and bigger, and eventually I had to make a choice. I could either make a review of the movie where I talk about the problems I think it has and analyze the writing within it, or I could make the rewritten version of the movie that now existed inside my head. I chose the second one. This is my full reimagining of the Five Nights at Freddy's movie, and I'm super excited for you all to see it. It was a massive undertaking, but I'll say that I'm pretty happy with how it's all come out. Because of the direction this whole thing took, I won't be going into detail about why I changed certain things, so please, if you have any questions about why I made certain changes and did certain things, please leave a comment and I'll be happy to talk about it. Please mind the content warnings, as this rewrite touches on some pretty dark topics and I don't want anyone to be caught off guard. Full disclosure, I am not a movie writer or a professional storyboard artist. I am just full of excitement and passion. With all that said, I think we are overdue to start. Thank you for clicking on the video, and I really hope you enjoy this massive project. See you on the flip side! We start with a cold open, similar to the one we got in the film. There's a security guard in the office that we all know so well. Both security doors are down, and they're clearly frantic. It looks like they've had a pretty rough night, and it's about to get worse because they've just run out of power. We sit there in the dark, barely able to see. After a few seconds, a music box begins to play as a pair of glowing eyes appear in the left doorway. The security guard sits in terror for a few moments, but then fear gets the better of them and they run out of the office the other way, trying to get away. It looks like they might at first. There's no one in the hall, and it seems like the way to the front exit is open. But before they can get very far, something steps out of the shadows. Bonnie blocks the path. The security guard turns and runs, making for the emergency exit, their last ray of hope. They make it, but it won't open. What is that? Faint humming? They slowly turn. At the end of the hall stands Foxy. The guard is frozen in place, the inevitability of their fate not quite sinking in. They start quietly pleading, then frantically struggling to open the door, but Foxy slowly begins to approach, walking at first, but then breaking into a sprint. The scream of the guard is almost drowned out by Foxy's own shrieking as the screen slams to black, and the title Five Nights at Freddy's fades in. From here, we fade to the opening credits. It's a shot of a car driving through several residential areas as various credits fade in and out. Music plays throughout the introduction, and when the car finally stops, we find that it's playing from the radio. The song stops, and our news anchor announces that it's a beautiful Wednesday evening. Before they can get much further, the car turns off, and the final credit shows the audience that the driver is Mike Schmidt. He's looking nervously at the house. He wants to go knock, that's why he came here in the first place, but he can't seem to find the courage to get out just yet. We can hear a voice softly calling Mike's name. Eventually it gets loud enough and it jumps us back into a flashback. Past Mike is in an ice cream parlor, startled out of his daydream by the cashier. "That's 2 banana splits, right?" Yeah, sorry. And a small cone. "Coming right up. What's the occasion?" What? Well, I mean, this is a lot of ice cream for one guy. What's the occasion?" "Oh, no, it's not all for me. It's, my aunt and sister are coming to see me at work." "Oh, that's nice. Has it been a while since you saw them?" That question seems to hit a little bit close to home. Mike sounds a little strange when he says that, yeah, it's been a while. He's clearly nervous about whatever this meeting is, and he wants it to go well even though he doesn't have much confidence that it will. The cashier either pretends not to notice or doesn't notice that he's nervous, and just keeps chatting away, talking about how, oh, it's so hard to visit family that's far away, and do you have any family around here? Mike is looking around for Aunt Jane and Abby and not really paying attention. As he's surveying, he catches sight of a man grab a child by the arm and pull them away. Everything starts to fade out of focus. Noises grow quieter as all he can focus on is the two walking. The man pulling the child along, angry almost. He starts jogging after them and breaks into a run, looking panicked. He yells after them to stop, and as he reaches them, he tackles the man into the fountain. Hey! As Mike is being dragged away, still a little shell-shocked by what he just did, he catches a glimpse of the ice cream counter where he just was. Abby doesn't see him, but Aunt Jane does. Her expression is a mixture of horrified, confused, and absolutely furious. Back in the present, we're with Mike in the car as he continues to stare at the house. What happened is clearly weighing on him, but eventually he manages to gather himself and exit the car. He knocks on the front door, and Aunt Jane answers, and she is not happy to see him. Mike wants to apologize to Abby for missing what was supposed to be their first meetup in a long time, but Aunt Jane is not having any of it. She thinks Mike shouldn't be there at all, and she's definitely not planning on letting him in the house. Aunt Jane is determined that he's not getting in, but Mike is determined that he is going to apologize to his sister, and the two start arguing. Mike insists that Jane needs to give him a chance to make things right, and Jane points out that the ice cream meetup was his chance, and he instead decided to beat a man unconscious. Frankly, he's incredibly lucky that he didn't have to serve jail time. Their argument starts to get a little more heated, as Aunt Jane talks about how he's been a delinquent for years, always causing trouble. Why on earth should she trust him with a child that's recently traumatized? Mike is frustrated, but he's trying really hard not to let it get to him, until she happens to mention someone named Garrett. This changes things. Where before, Mike was defensive but trying to keep it together, this makes him truly, deeply angry. He immediately cuts her off. Don't talk about Garrett. Whoever Garrett is, and whatever happened with that, it's very clear that Mike doesn't want to discuss it with anyone, let alone someone who's planning to use it against him. Before she has any chance to respond, he continues, saying that Abby clearly hates it here, so why doesn't she just mind her own business? The two look primed to actually start hitting each other, but before they can, Abby appears, running to the front door and talking about how excited she is that Mike's come to visit. A very awkward silence follows, with Abby getting nervous and asking what's going on. In the face of this, Jane relents a little, saying that Mike is staying until she finishes making dinner. This is good enough for Abby. She grabs Mike's hand to drag him to her room, and he follows along. Aunt Jane glares as he goes past, letting him know that he really shouldn't push his luck here. Abby leads Mike through the house, and as they walk, it's clear that he hasn't really been there before. Or if he has, it's not enough to be familiar with the layout. The place isn't necessarily unwelcoming, but it definitely has the tidiness of someone who is not used to having children around. Abby's room greatly contrasts to this. There are drawings all over the walls, toys all over the floor. It seems she's generally left to her own devices and in her own little world that she's created here. She excitedly starts to show Mike everything, all the drawings on the walls, all the books on the shelves, just basically everything.
Here it is.
Rivals, huh? Are they like rival families?
Rival clans. It's technically inaccurate since lions and tigers don't live on the same continent, but I like it anyways. Look, I drew a picture. That's me. I'm defending the territory from jackals.
Wow, that's pretty amazing, Abs. Who's that next to you?
That's you, duh.
Really? Wow, I love it. Are we, always fighting off jackals?
No, there's lots of enemies. The hippos are the worst ones, 'cause you can't fight them. You have to be smarter than they are.
Really? Hippos?
A hippo can kill you easily, Mike.
What? No way. I bet I could take one.
They can literally bite you in half.
So I'll just be faster. Duck out of the way.
They can run 19 miles an hour.
Well then, obviously, I'll just run 20 miles an hour.
Duh. You're so stupid. You can't run that fast.
No, I definitely can. The conversation descends into lighthearted banter, with Mike asking more about the book and Abby being happy to share. In the back of his mind, Mike is still worried about the situation with Aunt Jane, but he's always been able to forget about his problems when he's spending time with Abby. The two are very close, and the time they've spent apart hasn't done anything to change that, even though they've both clearly missed each other. As Mike is asking questions, he eventually brings up school, and the mood changes entirely. Abby is much less willing to talk about that. Mike decides not to let it go, just prodding at her a bit, trying to figure out what's going on. He knows Abby loves to learn, and so he really would like to know what the problem would be. Eventually, Mike's gentle needling is effective, and Abby tells him that she doesn't really have any friends at this school. She's done her best to talk to people and put herself out there like Aunt Jane has told her to, but no one seems to want anything to do with her. And anyone who does want to talk to her just wants to talk about how Dad left. Mike isn't really sure how to respond. Their father is clearly a delicate subject for him, and he has his own problems that he hasn't sorted out with it, but he tries to give advice anyway. He tells her that if she just ignores what's going on, after a while, people will forget what happened with their dad. She just has to stick it out until people stop bringing it up. After that, it'll be easy to make friends. In the silence that follows, Mike takes the opportunity to properly apologize for missing the ice cream meetup. He tried to do it earlier, but Abby kept talking over him, almost like she didn't want to think about it. Abby gets quiet and asks why he missed it. Mike once again has some trouble answering. He doesn't know how to explain what happened. He's ashamed of it, but he doesn't want to lie to her either. Eventually he just tells her that he made a mistake. He saw something he thought was a problem, but it wasn't what it looked like. And he rushed in without thinking about it. That's something he does sometimes if he's not careful. Abby is quiet for a second, then asks if that's why they wouldn't let Mike take care of her after Dad left. Mike looks pained, and eventually says that, yeah, that's one of the reasons. There's another silence, this one much more dejected than the last. Eventually, Mike breaks it. Try to be good for Aunt Jane, okay?
Mike, I hate it here. She never listens to what I try and talk, and she smells like cigarettes.
Hey, don't be mean. You know she's been trying to quit. She's trying her best, Abs.
I thought you hated Aunt Jane.
No, I don't. Mike looks pained again. He's clearly remembering the fight the two of them just had, and is regretting what he said. I don't hate Aunt Jane. She and I, we don't agree on a lot of things. There's a lot that he can't really find the words to explain all the complex everything that is between them, but he eventually tells her that both of them care and want Abby to be taken care of. As the conversation continues, it's clear that Aunt Jane is stiff and stuffy and not very good with children, but she's trying anyway, and that's worth something.
The camera backs out of the open doorway to show that Aunt Jane has been standing there, listening. We don't know how long she's been there, but she looks conflicted. Mike tells Abby that he knows it's been hard, but can she please try for Aunt Jane? Just a little bit? Abby is hesitant, but promises that, yes, she can try. The conversation moves on to lighter topics from there, with Mike teasing Abby to break up the tension. Aunt Jane eventually steps into view and knocks on the doorframe. Dinner's ready. It's time for Mike to go. Abby is disappointed that he's leaving and asks if he'll be visiting again soon. Mike hesitates and eventually says that they'll just have to see. Abby goes to wash up for dinner, but not before giving Mike a hug and one of the drawings she made. She hopes she'll see him again soon. After Abby leaves, there is once again a stifling silence. Mike doesn't know what to say, and he's not sure how to gracefully leave, so he eventually says he's just gonna go. But as he heads for the door, Jane interrupts him. "Do you know what next Saturday is, Michael?" April 8th? Abby's birthday. "Yes. To be entirely blunt, Michael, I think you've wasted a large portion of your life. Even before my sister passed, you made decisions that I can't begin to understand, and you're certainly a terrible influence on your sister, especially considering your most recent actions." Mike stands, absorbing all this. Unlike at the door earlier, he just seems tired rather than angry. He doesn't have the energy to disagree or defend himself, because, honestly, he finds she's sort of right. He's done a lot of things he's not proud of, especially this most recent incident, and he doesn't really have the energy to deny it or justify himself right now. Jane notices this, and continues in a slightly kinder tone. "But no matter what I think of you, Abby turns 10 next week. Her teachers tell me it's a big milestone, double digits or something. Regardless of what I think or feel about you, I'm sure Abby would want you there. If you were to get a job and still have it by next Saturday, I don't think it would be too bad for you to make an appearance at her party." Mike has no idea what to say. He's caught somewhere between saying thank you and confirming that Jane isn't somehow messing with him. He manages to pull himself together a little and say that yes, of course he'll get a job, and yeah, he'll have it for the party, absolutely. Jane looks at him and tells him not to make her regret it. Mike takes that as his cue to leave, but he can read between the lines as well. It's amazing that he has another chance, but if he messes this up, he's not getting another one. It's all or nothing this time. He steps out the door and Jane closes the door behind him, curtly telling him not to drive too fast. Mike says he won't, then quickly tries to apologize for earlier, but the door shuts before he can. As Mike walks to his car, we get a strange shot. We're looking at him leaving from some distance away, from the driver's seat of a purple car. As he crosses the street, the camera follows, as if we're observing through another pair of eyes. Back in his own car, Mike is tired, but determined. This plan to go apologize to his sister had gone much better and much worse than he had expected, but he has a plan now. He starts the car, muttering to himself as he does. He can get a throwaway job by next Saturday, no problem. From here we have a montage of the next several days as Mike tries and fails to find another job. He applies for dozens of different positions with dozens of requirements, and seems to be rejected every single time. The sun rises and sets, and he gets more desperate, but still, there is no good news. Occasionally through the montage, if you're paying attention, you can catch sight of a purple car in the background of some shots. Eventually the montage ends with Mike in an office, in front of a career counselor. Mike is clearly at the end of his rope here. He's desperate for just something, anything. He will do literally anything. But the counselor doesn't seem sympathetic. Or rather, they do, but they're not about to be gentle when they tell him that he is not getting a job anytime soon. He has a terrible job history, and he just got slapped with an assault charge. There is no way he's getting a job. As Mike gets frustrated, they suggest that maybe he can come back in another day. Who knows, maybe something will change. Mike isn't an idiot, though. He can see that this is mostly a platitude. Things aren't going to change, at least not quickly enough. As he goes to leave, his frustration starts to boil over. He tries to slam the door, but it has one of those anti-slammer mechanisms, so it slows down and quietly clicks shut behind him. Once Mike gets outside, he tries to kick a trash can, but it has its own anti-slam mechanism in the form of being bolted to the ground. Honestly, this day just couldn't get any worse. Hey! God! Whoa there! Just me. Someone's jumpy. Sorry, what? Mike is very confused at the sudden appearance of this man, but he doesn't really have time to ask questions. Mystery Man introduces himself as Dave. Dave Miller. And, well, he really couldn't help overhearing. Is he correct that Mike needs a job? Because, if so, they can help each other. See, he's been having some trouble with vandals breaking into an old building he owns, and he'd like to hire a night guard to keep an eye on it. But oh, it's so hard to find someone who can work nights. He acknowledges that the hours are pretty bad, and he can't pay all that well, but it seems like Mike might be interested. Mike is justifiably weirded out by this guy. He just appeared out of nowhere with the magic solution to his problem, and that is strange. But, as weird as this is, he does need a job, and it doesn't seem like he's gonna get one through normal avenues. He hesitantly asks what being this night guard actually entails, and Dave is quick to tell him it's super easy. He just has to keep an eye on the cameras and keep out any burglars he might see. You could probably do it in your sleep. Mike can see how suspicious this is from a mile away, but yes, he thinks he would be interested. Dave is immediately ecstatic. Oh, thank you so much. You're doing me such a big favor. This is gonna be fantastic. You won't regret it. Mike tries to ask if he needs to sign some papers, but Dave just gives him a paper with an address typed on it and tells him to be there at 10 p.m. on Monday. He climbs into a familiar purple car and drives away before Mike has the chance to ask any more questions. Mike stares after him for a second, but before quietly accepting that this is happening now. We follow him as he goes back to his apartment. It's in a very run-down part of town, and the apartment itself is very bare bones. Where Aunt Jane's apartment was clean because she liked everything to be just so, Mike's apartment has the cleanliness of someone who doesn't have anything that needs cleaning. There's almost nothing personal about the space. The only thing we can see that seems to belong to him is a Walkman with headphones and a stack of tapes next to it. This doesn't really feel like a place Mike lives in. It's more like a place he just stops in once in a while when he's not out and about. Eventually it starts to get late, but Mike doesn't seem to want to go to bed. Even though there's nothing to do in the apartment, he still keeps looking around, almost like he's avoiding it. But finally, he has to admit defeat, and he heads to the bed. He looks at it, oddly, somewhere between skepticism and dread. On the nightstand, we can see that the drawing Abby gave him is put on display. It's about the only bit of color and personality in the whole apartment. Mike looks at it, and it seems to cheer him up a little bit, and he uses that to rally himself for whatever it is that's stopping him from going to bed. He turns off the bedside light, and eventually manages to fall asleep. From here, we enter a dream. There's a family camping in the woods, and we see a younger Mike with his parents and someone else we don't know. It's a nice scene, almost serene. Just a family spending time together, casually. Mike's mom asks him to keep an eye on Garrett, and he starts to, but something distracts him. When he turns back, Garrett isn't there, and something's wrong. The colors start to change, their brightness fading into more subdued, worried undertones. The wind kicks up a little bit, causing strange, eerie rustling from the trees. He hears a car door slam, and when he turns, he's just in time to see a car begin speeding away. Garrett's confused face is staring at him from the back window. The young Mike screams out Garrett's name and starts running. As the trees go by, he becomes an adult, still sprinting even though the car is getting farther and farther away. There's no way he can catch it, but what else can he do? He's running, the world is getting darker, the wind louder, and the car is getting farther away, and there's no way he could ever catch it, but he has to try something! Mike starts awake. The room is dark and quiet except for his heavy breathing. After a second, The breathing slows, and he carefully gets up. He flicks on the dim lights in the bathroom and splashes his face. We hold here for a few moments. As Mike calms down, a bit of frustration starts to surface, but just like at the career counseling center, there's nowhere he can put it. He thumps his fist on the counter, but it doesn't seem to help. He looks overwhelmed, exhausted, frustrated, but not surprised. This nightmare is new to the audience, but it's something very familiar to him. He's had it before, often enough that it doesn't surprise him in the slightest. As awful as this dream makes him feel, it seems like it's familiar territory. It looks for a moment like he might allow his emotions to get the better of him, but he abruptly straightens and leaves the room. Moving in a way that's clearly practiced, he grabs the Walkman and starts listening to music in the headphones, loud. Even though it's already spotless, he starts to mindlessly clean the apartment, doing his best to do everything but think about what just happened. Just as we can see that the nightmare is normal, we see that this routine of cleaning and listening to music is also normal. This is clearly something he always does. Shove aside what the dream reminds him of and just do his best to avoid thinking and feeling anything about it. In the next scene, we're following Abby. It's a Monday morning at school, and she's clearly very nervous. After Aunt Jane drops her off, she stands on the sidewalk for a while, not really sure where to go. Eventually, she just starts to head for the classroom. Aunt Jane has given her some invitations for the party on Saturday. She seems a little excited about that, but mostly apprehensive. As she heads for the classroom, she's intercepted by some of her classmates, who tease and shove her around a bit, about how her dad left and what is she doing in a school like this anyway. Abby pushes past and does her best to follow Mike's advice. Just ignore them, just like Mike said. Throughout the first part of class, we see more examples of this bullying happen. People talk behind her back, make fun of her, just all sorts of nasty things. There's a couple times where she manages to screw up the courage to give someone an invitation to her party, but it never seems to go well. They either reject it outright, or she finds the invitation in the trash a few minutes later. All in all, it's not a good experience. And she's fully miserable by the time her aunt comes to pick her up. And the worst part is, she seems to be used to it. Classmates seem to take every opportunity to jeer at her and make fun of her for everything from her outfit to her upbringing to her broken family situation. And she doesn't seem surprised by any of it. Through it all, she just does her best to keep her head down and ignore it. Aunt Jane tries to start a conversation about how the day went, but Abby is not in the mood for any talking, which is frustrating for Jane. When Jane asks about the invitation specifically, Abby peevishly tells her that no, actually, she thinks the party will be fine with just Mike there. She doesn't want anyone else. The two have a bit of an argument about this that doesn't really go anywhere and leaves both of them feeling annoyed and dejected. And the two of them drive home in stony silence. Even though Aunt Jane has been taking care of Abby for a while, she clearly doesn't have the same level of communication that Mike does. Once they get home, Abby goes straight up to her room, and can't be prompted to come out no matter what Aunt Jane does. In her room, Abby pulls out a stuffed tiger that she'd apparently been keeping in her backpack the entire day. She tells it about all that happened and how she really, really hates this school, but Mike is coming on Saturday, so she can hold out till then. Things will feel better. She knows it. From here we cut to Mike. He pulls up in front of a building with a sign saying Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Mike looks absolutely drained and exhausted, and is looking at the place skeptically. It's totally dark, and the entire place seems old and deserted. There's a phone booth attached to the side of the building, almost out of sight. All in all, it doesn't look like anyone is there, or that anyone has been there for ages. He checks his watch. 9:52. So it's not like he's crazy early. He gets out and goes to look through the front door. The inside looks just as dark as the outside. As he's about to start kicking himself for looking into a job that clearly wasn't real, he's startled by the sound of an approaching car. He turns just in time to see a police car pull up, the officer quickly stepping out and approaching rapidly. Before he can get a word out, she's up in his face, demanding to know what exactly he's doing here. Doesn't he know this is private property? Mike tries to tell her she's here for a job, but she doesn't seem to be having any of it. Who does he think he is? What, is he a vandal, hoping to sleep in here? She continues to ask questions and demand answers. Mike is getting flustered and somewhat defensive, but even though he's annoyed, he knows better than to start a fight with a police officer, so he's really not sure how to handle this. Before things can escalate further, though, they're interrupted by another car approaching. Dave exits and calls out to them, and the officer's demeanor completely changes. She very meekly asks Dave if Mike is there for a job of some sort. Dave steps close to them and cheerfully confirms, yes, Mike is the new security guard. The officer nods and says, right, she'll be off then. She leaves almost more quickly than she arrived, like she's in a hurry to get away. Mike is completely thrown off by this interaction and asks Dave if he knows this officer. Dave says, oh yes, that would be Officer Vanessa. This place is on her patrol route, so she stops by sometimes. He quickly changes the subject and keeps up a steady stream of chatter as he unlocks the gate and punches in the code to the front door. He talks vaguely about how he's so glad he found someone to look after the place, and it may look old, but yo, you should have seen it in its heyday. Once they're inside, Mike takes the opportunity to look around a little. It seems pretty standard for a family restaurant, even though everything's dusty and it looks a bit weird with all the lights off. He finally manages to get a word in against Dave's constant talking, asking what exactly his job is. Of course, how silly of me, getting distracted, just reminiscing, you know. But before I explain, do you want to meet the gang? Mike follows Dave to the curtained-off show stage, where Dave dramatically throws aside the curtains. Mike is a bit startled at the reveal. He doesn't know what he was expecting, but several animatronics that are at least 2 feet taller than him was not it. Dave introduces them as Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica. They all stand, not moving, just staring. Dave moves to another, even smaller stage, and pulls that curtain open too, revealing a 4th animatronic. This one is named Foxy. It seems just as still as the others are. Mike realizes that Dave is staring at him expectantly, so he aims for a neutral tone and says, wow, that's pretty cool. Dave agrees, saying these guys are pretty state-of-the-art for the time, implying that the animatronics are probably what people would break in to steal. Mike is having a hard time listening as he keeps glancing at the animatronics standing there. He feels a bit uneasy as he's looking at them. Dave eventually says that he's so glad that Mike likes these guys. Some of the other people he tried to hire seemed to think they were pretty creepy. Dave turns to look at Mike, and there's a strange intensity in his gaze that doesn't fit with the conversation they're having. Mike isn't sure how to respond, and he eventually says, well, people say all sorts of things. Dave stares just a little too long. Then the moment breaks as he quickly yanks the curtain shut. Oh yes, people say so many things. It's crazy how rumors can start so easily. He walks down the hallway, fast. He'd better show Mike what he's meant to be doing. Mike follows, glancing one more time at the stages before they turn a corner. Dave leads the way down the hall, once again babbling about something or other. The first door they pass has a worn-down painting of Chica in a police uniform on it. The bird looks stern, with a speech bubble that claims, "Stop! Staff only beyond this point." As they walk, he explains that he can't afford to keep the power going all the time, so Mike will have a limited amount of power for his shift, which starts at midnight. Which shouldn't be a problem. You've got a pretty uneventful job. Another door they pass as they're talking has "Employees Only" written in all caps on it. They get to the office, and Mike digs through a box in the back, handing Mike a security jacket. This will be his uniform. After Mike puts it on, Dave hands him the key to the padlock on the gate and a piece of paper with his phone number, telling Mike to call him if there's any issues. Mike puts both in his pocket, and Dave starts to leave. He calls over his shoulder, reminding Mike not to use up all the power and to be in the office by midnight. He's not paying Mike to wander around. And with that, he's gone. Mike takes the opportunity to look around. The office is crowded, with stacks of old boxes and seemingly random knickknacks. In one corner, behind some boxes and under an old shirt, he finds a stack of what look like animatronic maintenance guides. Next to those is a flashlight that seems to work, even though it's dim and he had to hit it pretty hard to get it to turn on. He starts to look in the lockers, but after finding a bizarrely creepy figurine, he decides he'll just leave them be. Eventually, the clock flips over to midnight and the power comes on, allowing the array of screens on the desk to come to life for the first time. There's clearly supposed to be a screen active for each camera, but most of them seem to be broken, showing nothing but static. The one in the center is the only one that seems somewhat reliable, requiring Mike to use the controls on the desk to flip through each camera manually. Mike notices for the first time the strange set of doors on either side of the office. He tests one and is very concerned when a reinforced door drops from the ceiling, but he ultimately decides that he doesn't need to think about this. He got a job, and he just needs to keep it until Saturday, and that'll be just fine. The first few hours, pretty much nothing happens. All is quiet, with Mike just occasionally going through the cameras. Eventually, though, as he's flipping through, he stops at the main stage. Weren't there 3 animatronics? The bunny, it's not there anymore. What was it called? Benny? Confused and concerned, he flips through the cameras, trying to figure out what's going on. And eventually he finds that the bunny has somehow moved into a storage closet. Mike picks up his flashlight and goes to check it out. Going through the place feels wrong, somehow. It had been off-putting before when he was there with Dave, but now it's gotten worse. The flashlight helps keep it at bay, but it really doesn't seem to be helping as much as it should. Eventually he finds the closet where he saw Bonnie. After taking a second to brace himself, he pushes open the door quickly. He'd been expecting to see an animatronic, and maybe the person causing it to move, but the closet's empty. This doesn't make any sense. The animatronic isn't exactly small. How could they have moved it so quickly? Maybe he just got the wrong closet. There's one right next to it that also has a camera. It's an easy mistake to make. Mike tries the handle, but it's locked. As he's turning to go and look elsewhere, he hears a click. He turns, and the previously locked door is slowly creaking open. Inside is pitch black. Mike stares. Slowly, he moves forward. Just on the threshold, he stops, calls out, "Hey." "Hey, who's there?" He steps into the room. It seems that he's found some sort of workshop or animatronic repair area. A non-functional copy of Freddy is sitting on the table, facing away from him. Different parts and pieces are piled on the table and shelves, although most of that space seems to be filled with spare character heads. Most of them don't have eyes, but it still feels like they're staring somehow. Mike calls out again, fighting to keep his voice steady. "This is private property. Listen, if you come out now, I won't report anything. You just have to leave. So why don't you just come out? Make it easy for me." His voice trails off. The flashlight has come across something leaning against the wall, something that you can't see through the cameras. There's no sign of the person causing the bunny to move, but up against the wall is another Freddy. But it's different than the one on stage or the one that's sitting on the table. This is old and dirty looking, with several parts of it missing or broken. The color is different too. Instead of the dark brown that we're used to, it's a yellowish gold, with some parts of it going slightly green with age. Curiosity is occasionally more powerful than fear, and Mike steps closer, trying to figure out what exactly he's looking at. Mike is suddenly slammed with a confusing, jumbled mess of images flashing through his mind. It's painful and sudden, causing him to stumble backward, and a litany of sounds comes to join it. Children laughing, a scream, so much sound, it's too much. And through it all there's a voice, just trying to be heard, crying out. Mike manages to push himself upright, stumbling blindly to get out of the closet. Once he manages to get into the hall, the images slowly fade, sounds going with them. What the hell? His head feels like it's about to split in two. He has no idea what he just experienced. As he's slumped against the wall in the hallway, trying to recover, there's suddenly a sound. He looks up. The missing animatronic bunny is standing at the end of the hall, staring at him. Mike stares back. Bonnie, that's right. It was called Bonnie, wasn't it? Bonnie takes a step forward. Mike continues to stare, and the rabbit takes another step. This finally gets Mike to move. Somehow, he hadn't lost the flashlight in the scuffle, and he shines it around, trying to see who or what could be making this thing move. He calls out again, saying it's a great joke and they can come out now, but he's clearly starting to panic. Bonnie doesn't show any signs of stopping, and Mike can't find any sign that someone is moving it. It's just happening. The flashlight starts flickering again. Mike tries to bring it to life in the way he had previously, but it's beyond saving. It flickers one more time, and then dies, plunging the hallway into darkness. The rabbit doesn't seem to notice. Its eyes have a glow of their own, continuing to stare as it takes another step forward. This is too much for Mike. He turns and runs back to the office before this whatever it is can reach him. Once he gets back, he closes the metal door behind him and fumbles with the phone. He tries to call Dave, but the phone in the office doesn't seem like it makes outgoing calls. After seeing how much power the door is taking, he hesitantly opens it and finds that the hallway is empty. He checks the cameras and finds that Bonnie has returned to the closet he was in earlier, although this time he's staring at the camera. Mike spends the rest of the night alternating between pacing around and checking on Bonnie, who seems to switch between the closet and the front area. He's eventually startled when his watch goes off, signaling 6 a.m. and the end of his shift. He very cautiously makes his way to the main area and finds that all the animatronics are in their proper places. He pokes at them a little, just to check, but they don't show any signs of moving, so he has no choice but to leave, with no answers to what just happened. He finds Officer Vanessa waiting outside. She asks him how his first night was, and he has no idea how to respond. Eventually he says it was fine, and turns to lock the gate. Vanessa starts talking as he's closing up, saying that she just doesn't understand how anyone would take a job like this. She's pretty sure literally anything else would be better. This is a dead-end job, and honestly, does he really see himself working here in 5, 10 years? Mike doesn't really think that's any of her business, but he is, again, smart enough not to start a fight with a police officer, so he says he's just doing what he can right now. Seeing the phone booth attached to the building, he heads toward it. Vanessa follows and continues to talk. If you're thinking of calling your boss, he's not going to answer. Mike just sighs to himself and tries to find some change in his pockets. Vanessa gets really close until he's forced to look at her. Hey, I'm serious. The guys before you tried to call too. He never picks up. There were people working here before me? Yeah, most of them quit. Complained about work conditions. She squints at him a little before reaching into her pocket. Here. She gives him a handful of quarters. You can do what you want, but let me give you some free advice. This place was doing just fine when it was sitting here empty. It doesn't need a night guard, and you don't need to work for a man who doesn't care what happens to you. She turns to walk back to her car, shoulder-checking Mike on the way. It's sudden enough he almost falls over. Get a different job, Mike. There's nothing here worth staying for. She gets in her car and drives away. Mike watches her go, caught between confusion about what she said and irritation at being treated like that. Eventually, he just calls the number Dave gave him. Unfortunately, Vanessa was right. He gets no answer. He leaves a message asking if the animatronics have any programming active that makes them move at night, and with nothing else to do, he goes home. The call gave him no answers, but he doesn't really have any choice except to go home and hope for a call back. We cut to later in the day. It's Tuesday, and we're with Abby at school again. It's recess time, and Abby is trying to figure out what to do. She looks like she's thinking about joining the kids on the playground, but no, that probably won't end well. Especially not when she sees the group from yesterday. She goes to a secluded corner of the yard and sits by herself, dejected. It's clearly going to be a long recess. Hello! Abby startles and looks to see a man she doesn't know, standing on the other side of a chain-link fence. Sorry, I'm being so rude right now. I'm Dave Miller. Your brother's new boss.
You know Mike?
Yeah, absolutely I know Mike. I just hired him to do some work for me, and he asked if I could go check on his sister while he's at school. So how are you? Your name's Abby, right? Abby is a bit confused and suspicious, but seems to believe him. Dave sits down as the two start talking, each on the other side of the fence. He asks how she is, what's she interested in, how does her day usually go. He seems particularly interested in how long the school day is and what she gets up to when she's not there. After a few minutes, Dave says that he should probably get going, recess is almost over and she needs to get back to class. Abby's a little confused by the interaction, but agrees that she probably should. Dave asks her to please not tell Aunt Jane or any of the teachers about him coming by. Jane might think that Mike is trying to get out of coming to see her, when really he's just busy, and the teachers might tell Jane. Abby agrees and goes back inside, and Dave slips away, unseen by anyone but Abby. When Aunt Jane comes to pick up Abby, it's much the same as it was yesterday. Aunt Jane tries to ask her how her day was, and Abby is vague and unresponsive, going straight to her room when they get home. Jane watches her go, and her face is pinched and worried. She seems to come to a decision, and she makes a phone call, asking for a meeting with the headmaster. We return to later at night, where we're back at Mike's apartment. The security jacket Dave gave him is thrown over the back of the chair, and there's evidence that he's already done his avoid sleeping as long as possible routine, even though he now has a graveyard shift sleep schedule. We see him in bed, tossing and turning, and we enter into a familiar nightmare. It seems much the same as before. An idyllic family just spending time with one another. Mike's mom asks him to watch Garrett, and he agrees but gets distracted. But this time, when he turns around, it's not just Garrett that's gone. Everything is. The tent, his parents, the picnic table. Mike has changed too, becoming his adult self. He's staring around. He doesn't understand. This nightly vision of the past is horrible, but he knows it. This isn't the way it's supposed to go. He's not chasing after a car that kidnapped his brother. He's just alone, standing in the woods that are now strangely silent. The wind eventually rustles behind him, and he turns. Standing on the other side of the clearing is Garrett, staring at him. The two look at each other, Mike with disbelief, Garrett with an intensity and focus that doesn't fit on a face that young. Mike steps forward, hand lifting a little, like he wants to reach out. "Garrett?" Garrett remains still, then turns and runs into the woods. Mike runs after him, almost on instinct. Hey, wait! Garrett seems to appear and disappear at random, making him surprisingly hard to keep track of as the two run along. Eventually the trees open up again, and Mike stops short. In front of him is a washed-out version of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. It looks sad and derelict, completely out of place here. There's no way it could be in the childhood woods that Mike knows, but here it is. There's no more time to absorb what he's seeing, as Mike sees Garrett disappearing into the building's front door. Once again, almost without thinking, he follows. Once he passes the threshold, things get even stranger. Unlike outside, the inside is alive and full of noise. There are all sorts of people here, families of all sizes, enjoying food and various games the place has to offer. It's strangely surreal seeing it so full, but it's even stranger because even though there are many conversations happening around him, Mike can't understand what anyone is saying. He knows words are being spoken, he can tell, but everything blends together. He tries to get the attention of parents and staff members, but no one seems to be able to see him. He's a witness here, not a participant. His attention is drawn to one of the children that's playing the arcade games. They're wearing a distinct pair of paper rabbit ears, but that's not what catches Mike's attention. Unlike everyone else in the restaurant, this child doesn't seem to have a face. Where there would be a face is just a blurry, smeared mess, like a wet canvas that someone's accidentally touched. They interact with everything the same as all the others, but the lack of face makes it seem uncanny and strange. The child eventually finishes their game and walks off to the side. They may not have a face, but it's pretty easy from the body language to tell that this child is bored. They don't seem to have a group to go back to. Mike starts to approach. Maybe he can interact with this uniquely faceless child, but his path is cut off by a strangely silent, enormous rabbit animatronic. At least, he thinks it's an animatronic. It doesn't quite move like one. He saw Bonnie walking the night before, and this rabbit doesn't have the robotic stiffness that Bonnie did. It's strangely unsettling to watch. The rabbit and the faceless child start talking to each other. Mike can't make out any of the words, but the rabbit is pointing to the child's ears and then at its own, and they seem to have a connection over it. The golden rabbit extends a hand to the child, beckoning. The faceless child takes it, and the two start walking towards a door. On the door is the familiar painting of Chica, proclaiming that it's staff only beyond this point. Mike understands on an instinctive level that something is wrong here. He starts walking after them, calling out to the faceless child, but neither seem to hear. As he takes a few steps, just as they reach the door, the floor seems to disappear out from under him, and he falls, plunging into darkness. He startles awake, back in his bed, in the real world. Eventually, he gets up and goes to the bathroom. He does his usual splash the face in the bathroom routine, but it's missing the weight of before because he's just baffled. His nights have always been restless, but at least he understood what was going on. What did he just see? Was this some strange vision his brain concocted from the stress of the night before? But that doesn't make sense. He doesn't remember his dreams except when they're the familiar nightmare of his past mistakes. He has no idea what to make of what he just saw. Eventually, though, his watch goes off, signaling that it's time to head in for work. So he tries to shake it off and focus on that instead. He arrives at Freddy's and goes to unlock the gate, but the key isn't in his pocket. What? He couldn't have dropped it, could he? He checks the other pocket, but the key isn't there either. He's starting to freak out. He never took it out. He never did anything. What happened? Where is it? As he's starting to panic, there's a familiar sound of tires over gravel. Mike turns and sees Vanessa stepping out of her police car. She sees him looking frazzled and stares a moment before rolling her eyes and tossing something at him. Mike catches it on instinct and looks down to see the key he'd lost a few seconds ago. I found it on one of my rounds after you left, right next to the door. If you're going to be a security guard, you should really keep better track of your things. Someone could have broken in. Mike isn't sure how to respond. Saying thank you feels like the right thing to do, but he doesn't think Vanessa would appreciate it, so he just says he'll be more careful. She just looks at him skeptically and doesn't show any signs of leaving, so he just unlocks the gate and goes in. Just before the door closes, she calls after him, suggesting that maybe he should look into other career paths. Once inside, Mike takes a second to breathe. He hesitantly approaches the animatronic stage, pulling the curtains back just slightly. The animatronics are all there, completely still. There's no sign that they've moved since the night before. Mike continues to look, particularly at Bonnie, before decisively closing the curtains. He looks at his watch. 10:07. Looks like he has a little bit of time. In a little montage, Mike proceeds to search the pizzeria top to bottom. He looks in every room, every closet, anywhere he can think of that someone might be hiding. He checks everything once, twice, making sure it's empty. There's an old supply room he finds with some windows, but most of them are boarded off, and the one that isn't is way too small for an adult to get through. There's a couple of other exits in the building, but they're all locked for some reason, which is concerning in and of itself, but it means no one can get in except through the entrance, so Mike doesn't think much of it. The only place he can't bring himself to enter is the backstage area, where the Golden Bear is. He tries to get up the courage, but after a moment, he just checks the door, and is pretty relieved to find that it's locked. He turns away, then turns back, just in case. The door stays locked. It's now time for his shift to start. Mike enters the office and prepares for the cameras to come on. He's a bit calmer than before. It's clear to him now that he either imagined the night before, or someone snuck in and pulled an extremely bizarre prank on him. Whoever it was clearly isn't here anymore, so this isn't gonna be an issue. As long as he doesn't think about it too hard, Mike can convince himself that this is going to be a normal, boring 6 hours of watching almost broken cameras. And for a little while, Mike is right. Nothing seems to be happening, and he starts to relax. Then as he flicks through the cameras again, he sits up so fast he almost falls. Chica's gone from the main stage. Mike flicks through the cameras, the calm he'd been pretending to have vanishing completely. He goes through them once, twice. He can't find her. On the third go-around, though, he notices something. There's a camera that's only a black screen. Apparently it's for the kitchen. He hadn't paid it any attention, but he can actually hear something in that room. The clanging of pots and pans. Mike stares for a second, dread building. Then he stands and forces his hesitation aside. He checked this place top to bottom before his shift, so there's no way Chica moving can be a joke someone's playing on him. But what other explanation is there? He needs to go look. There's a logical explanation for this, and the only way to find it is to go and see. Moving through the halls is even harder without the dim flashlight he had the night before. But thanks to his exploration a few hours ago, he manages to find the way. It gets a bit easier as he gets closer and he can hear the sounds and follow them. Arriving at the kitchen, he slowly pushes open the door. It's better lit than he expected, and it gives him full view of what Chica's doing. Instead of things being randomly thrown around like it sounded, there seems to be an intent on the way the animatronic is moving. She moves the pans from burner to burner, smacks the pots with a ladle, pretending to taste test something with an empty spoon. She looks, for all the world, like she's playing, pretending to be cooking something. It's a bizarrely endearing sight, and Mike, once again, has absolutely no idea how to respond. He'd convinced himself that when he checked, he'd find something rational, like a raccoon knocking things over. This is far beyond anything he could be expecting. The raccoon idea didn't make much sense, but it would have made more sense than what he's seeing right now. There's no real logical explanation for what's happening right now, but Mike isn't quite ready to accept that these guys might be moving on their own, so he tries to take control of the situation. He very hesitantly steps further into the kitchen and calls out, "Hey!" The robot's head snaps towards him, and Mike immediately regrets what he did, but he tries to power through anyway, trying to call out to whoever might be playing a joke on him. Chica starts moving toward him, and she's not nearly as slow and methodical as Bonnie was. Mike backs out of the kitchen and into the hall, but Chica is surprisingly fast. She reaches him and grabs his arm, continuing to walk and nearly pulling him off his feet. She's much stronger than seems normal, pulling Mike along easily, even as he's struggling and digging his heels in. She's not affected by anything he tries to do to get her to let go, and she doesn't respond to any of his shouting or demands for explanation, just continuing to pull him toward a destination unknown. Somewhere in the struggle, something clicks in Mike's mind. This is real. There's no logical explanation for what's happening, but that doesn't change the fact that it is happening. These animatronics are moving on their own, and the only thing Mike knows for sure is that he does not want to go wherever this dead-eyed, massive thing is dragging him to. Mike struggles even harder, and even though he can't break Chica's hold, he manages to slip his arm out of the sleeve of the jacket. He manages to slip the rest of the way out and starts running back to the office. Chica turns to follow once she realizes she's holding only fabric, but Mike can be fast too when he wants to. He makes it back to the office and shuts the door behind him, flipping through the cameras. He can see Chica making her way to the office, and he tracks her progress through the camera. Before losing sight of her just outside the door, he clicks the light on and startles back. Chica is close to the glass, way too close. Her beak wide open and eyes staring. Somehow, paradoxically, he expects the glass to fog from her breathing, but that doesn't make sense. Chica's a robot, a weird one that shouldn't be moving, but shouldn't be breathing either. And yet, the absence of that tiny bit of fog makes her stillness all the more unsettling. Mike clicks the light off. Eventually, he hears heavy footsteps as the animatronic moves away, but he doesn't open the door until he hears the noises in the kitchen start again. His power level suffered, but Mike can't bring himself to care. Bonnie eventually leaves the stage as well, but no one else comes to the door that night. His watch signals 6 a.m. eventually, and the cameras remain on just long enough for Mike to see Bonnie and Chica return to the stage. The camera focuses on the power that was left, 8%, cutting it just a little close. Mike slowly leaves the office. He finds his security jacket discarded on the floor. He checks the pocket and finds that, thankfully, the padlock key is still there. As he leaves the building, he looks at the arm that Chica grabbed. It feels stiff, but there's no sign of bruising. He almost wishes there was some proof that it actually happened, but there's nothing. Mike exits the building and finds that Vanessa is still there. It doesn't look like she's moved since he went in at the start of his shift. "Rough night in there?" "No, it was fine." Vanessa doesn't look like she believes him, but Mike is too tired to really care. He just wants to go home and think, or maybe try his best not to think. He starts towards his car, then pauses. Hey, Officer Vanessa?" "Just Vanessa's fine." "Right, Vanessa, this is part of your regular patrol route, right? You come by pretty often? At night?" Vanessa looks at him, raising an eyebrow. Mike takes that as a yes, and continues. "Have you ever seen anything strange go on inside?" "Depends. What do you count as strange?" "I don't know, weird noises, or the animatronics moving by themselves. Have you ever seen the animatronics in there moving around at night?" just because. Vanessa eyes him for a second, then glibly tells him the animatronics haven't been active for years. Even if they did have a night mode, which they probably don't, why on earth would they be programmed to wander around? Honestly, Mike, you just seem tired. Exhaustion can do weird things to your head. I've seen it happen to all sorts of people. Not everyone is built to handle a night shift. If this is what you've been seeing, you should probably look at working somewhere else. As Vanessa talks, Mike's mood plummets even more. He's not sure why he bothered asking, since Officer Vanessa seems to only care about being condescending. He curtly tells her thanks, and gets in his car, driving away annoyed, confused, and trying very hard to ignore the gnawing sense of dread that's starting to build in his chest. The ringing of a school bell transitions us to Wednesday morning at Abby's school. The bell is telling everyone it's time for recess, and everybody's trying to get outside, except for Abby. She lingers behind, and once everyone has left, she approaches the teacher and asks if she can stay inside for recess. The teacher sternly tells her that, just like she told her before, all the children need to go outside for recess. Abby reluctantly obeys, facing the process of recess spent dodging her tormentors. They haven't seen her yet, so Abby makes her way to the edge of the recess area, trying her best not to draw attention to herself. She hears someone calling to her. It's Dave again, beckoning her closer as he stands on the opposite side of the fence. She approaches, still a bit cautious, but nothing bad happened when he talked to her yesterday, so he's probably fine to talk to. Dave and her start up a conversation, similar to their first, with Dave once again asking what she gets up to on a day-to-day basis. He also starts to ask some more personal questions. He sees so many children out and about, but Abby's by herself. Doesn't she have any friends to play with? Abby tells him that no, she doesn't. Dave is astounded. Surely, a nice girl like her must have some friends. Abby gets a bit annoyed and says no, she doesn't. She proceeds to go on a rant as she talks about how much she hates this school. Everyone here can tell she's different and doesn't want anything to do with her. And every time she tells one of the teachers what's been happening, they don't believe her, or they don't care. Dave is sympathetic, tilting his head to the side and nodding along as he talks, but his eyes are strangely sharp. He's started to get a picture of what Abby's life is like, and he's showing a lot more interest in it than is appropriate or normal, given the fact that he's a stranger. Abby eventually sits down, her anger fading into glumness. She said if she just disappeared, no one at school would even notice. Dave's interest gets even sharper, into something close to eagerness as he questions her. Really? You don't think anyone would miss you? Abby confirms, and he continues. None of the teachers? Not even your aunt or brother? Abby admits that Mike would probably worry if Aunt Jane called and told him. And Aunt Jane would probably be mad and upset, maybe. As Abby is talking, we get a close-up of Dave. We see him glance up. His manic focus fades as he notices something Abby doesn't. On a close-up of Abby, she asks Dave if he thinks she did something wrong. When she doesn't get an answer, she looks up and finds that the other side of the fence is empty, like Dave was never there at all. She stands up and goes in for a closer look, calling out as she tries to figure out where he went. She's interrupted when her bullies arrive, demanding to know who she was talking to. Abby tries to cover her fear with defiance, saying that she was talking to her friend Dave. One of the bullies says he doesn't see anyone, with another saying that there shouldn't be anyone hanging around outside the fence. One of them sees this as an opportunity and starts snidely commenting that Abby's so pathetic, she started imagining people to talk to. Abby denies this, insisting that Dave is real and was just here, but the bullies have found their theme for the day and start mercilessly making fun of her. Their viciousness eventually gets to Abby and she shoves past them, running away with tears in her eyes. She falls once as she's running, getting her uniform dirty. Eventually she finds another place to hide, where she sits and has a moment of quiet as tears begin to fall. There's a brief scene where we're back with Mike. He's listening to music and going through his daily routine of delaying sleep by cleaning his apartment top to bottom, but it doesn't seem to be working to distract him. The security jacket from Freddy's keeps catching his eye. Eventually, frustrated, he turns off his music and throws it onto his bed so he doesn't have to look at it as he's cleaning. As he turns to leave, he catches sight of the drawing Abby gave him. He picks it up, his demeanor softening a little bit, before he seems to consider something. We see him by the phone in his apartment, looking nervous. Eventually, he steels himself and punches in a number from memory. The phone rings a couple of times before Aunt Jane's voice instructs Mike to leave a message after the tone. Mike says hello to Aunt Jane and tells her he's gotten a job. It's a night shift, so his hours are a bit weird, but it means he should be available during the day for Abby on Saturday. He asks how Abby's been the past few days and rambles a bit, talking about how he's glad that he gets the chance to see her and he hopes that things are going okay. He says that if Abby wants to call, he's happy to answer, realizes that Aunt Jane probably wouldn't allow that, so he quickly adds, or if you'd rather call yourself to tell me what's going on, that's fine too. He winces. Jane calling him is even less likely than Abby doing it. Mike awkwardly ends the message with a thank you and a goodbye, then hangs up and puts his head in his hands. He'd been hoping that Abby would answer the phone and he'd be able to catch up with his sister, but now he just feels like an idiot. He gets up and heads to the couch. His music couldn't distract him, but maybe the TV will. He flips through the channels and eventually finds a weird vampire-themed soap opera. It's not really his thing, but it's better than infomercials, so may as well. He lets it play in the background as he gets back to cleaning. Back at the school, the day's come to an end. Aunt Jane is there and has been for a while. Judging by the tapping of her foot and her impatient expression, she seems annoyed, but there's an undercurrent of worry in her stance. As she glances between the watch and the area around, the worry seems to get more pronounced. It's been a while, and Abby still hasn't appeared. It's starting to get to her. In one of her glances around, she catches sight of a purple car parked a little way away from the school. She makes a face. What a terrible color for a car. It seems like Aunt Jane might just march straight in to find her niece, but then Abby appears, trudging out the front doors. Jane is relieved to see her, but also annoyed at her lateness. She starts to scold her for her tardiness, then, seeing that her uniform is dirty, she starts to scold her for that too. Somewhere in the middle of her tirade, she realizes that Abby looks like she's about to cry. She pulls up short and tries to ask what happened, but Abby isn't giving her any answers. Jane tries to push a bit more, and Abby starts to get angry, saying she doesn't want to talk about it. Eventually, Jane decides to just get them home. She tries several times along the way to start conversation or smooth over the initial angriness she had, but no luck. Abby gets less and less responsive as they head home, and eventually they just sit in silence. As per usual, as soon as they get home, Abby goes straight to her room, slamming the door behind her. She pulls out the familiar stuffed tiger and huddles under the covers, trying to hide from the world as best she can. Sometime later, Jane comes by, telling Abby it's time for dinner. Abby responds through the door, saying that she's not hungry. She sounds like she's been crying. Jane tries to cajole her out, saying that she made all her favorite foods, but there's no luck. Eventually, she decides to leave it alone. Back in the kitchen, Jane sits, at a loss about what to do. She notices that there's a message on the answering machine. She listens and finds that it's the message Mike left earlier, asking for updates and saying that he hopes things go well. Jane gets more despondent as she listens. A week ago, when Mike had come by, she'd felt so sure of herself when she said that Mike was a terrible influence and shouldn't be around Abby, but now she isn't so sure. In the face of Abby's continuing misery and Mike's earnest request to know how she is, her words from that day feel harsh and ill thought out. He certainly wouldn't be a fit guardian for a recently traumatized child, but maybe she isn't either. These past few days have driven home that she might not be doing as well as she'd hoped in taking care of her niece. The message ends and the robotic voice starts reciting how to listen again or delete the message. Jane is too lost in thought to pay it any attention. Back with Mike in the apartment, he's abandoned cleaning in favor of leaning against the back of the couch, watching the soap opera intently. The episode ends, and the announcer says that the late rerun of Immortal and Restless Hearts will continue after a commercial break. As he mentions this, Mike checks his watch and is surprised at how much time he spent watching. Now that he's been made aware of it, he can feel exhaustion trying to pull him down. He turns off the TV and gets ready for bed. He's still apprehensive about actually going to sleep, but shakes it off. His shift is in a few hours, and falling asleep there would be much worse than falling asleep here. This time as he goes to sleep, there's no sign of the usual nightmare. He opens his eyes and he's already in the empty clearing, in the quiet woods, with just the slightest hint of wind. He turns once again and finds Garrett waiting. staring at him. Just like the first time, Garrett holds his gaze before running off in the trees. Mike chases him again, calling his name and trying to get him to slow down. This time it isn't a surprise when the pizzeria appears, but Mike still pulls up before he enters. Garrett stops just before entering, meeting Mike's eyes before disappearing inside. After a moment's hesitation, Mike follows. The inside is bright and busy, with many different families bustling around. Like before, Mike can't understand what's being said, but this time, an occasional clear word just barely makes it through the wall and noise. Mike is looking around for Garrett, but a sound catches his attention. It takes a while to hear it over everyone else, but he recognizes it. Someone, a child, they're crying. He eventually finds a girl curled up in the corner, her face pressed to her knees. She looks very young, with blonde hair arranged in 2 pigtails. Mike feels like he's intruding, but he doesn't want to leave her there all alone. He crouches down and gets close, gently calling out to her. She looks up and Mike jumps. Like the child from the night before, where there should be a face, is a blank, smeared mess. He's closer than before, so he can see the blankness is shifting slightly, like whatever's making it unseen can't decide what type of nothing should be there. He manages to recover a little and tries to talk to her, asking what's wrong. She looks up a little more, and for a second he thinks that she can actually hear what he's saying, but then a shadow falls over him. He turns and sees the same yellow rabbit from the night before, again, moving in a way that no animatronic should be capable of. It crouches down to talk to the girl. It was the thing she was looking at the whole time. As before, Mike is an observer, not a participant. The rabbit seems to ask a question, and the girl starts crying in earnest as she answers. Mike can hear the crying just fine, but the words, they're still garbled and indiscernible. This, paired with her wiping eyes that don't seem to exist, makes the scene entirely uncanny. The rabbit tilts its head and nods along as she speaks, appearing generally sympathetic to whatever she's saying. Eventually, it reaches out a hand, beckoning her to come closer. She takes the hand, and the two start walking to that same staff-only door that the rabbit child went through the night before. Mike feels that same sinking sense of dread. He starts to follow, but something's wrong. His body is moving, but he can't get any closer. Even when he breaks into a jog and then a run, he's barely making any progress. The two have reached the door. The girl points at the Chica cartoon, and the rabbit nods reassuringly before gesturing for her to walk through. There's a second of hesitation, and then she does. The rabbit turns around briefly to scan the room. Its eyes pass over Mike, not seeing him at all, but he flinches anyway. He's suddenly able to make progress again, rushing forward. The rabbit slips through the door, and it shuts with a definitive click that carries more than it should. Mike is slammed back into reality, gasping for air. It takes him a second to realize that he's even awake, and then he sits, trying to recover. Cutting to the kitchen, Mike fills a glass of water and takes slow sips. He's more conflicted than confused this time. He can dismiss one strange dream, but this feels like the start of a pattern, and not one that he likes very much. He doesn't have time to think about it, though, because his watch is beeping. It's time to start heading to Freddy's. As Mike pulls up to the pizzeria, he sees that Vanessa's police cruiser is already there. By now, he knows what she's going to say, and he's getting a little tired of it. Just like he thought, as soon as he steps out, Vanessa starts talking. She keeps up a running commentary about how terrible this job is, with awful hours, and honestly, Mike looks exhausted. He should really be looking for something else. Mike does his best to unlock the gate and get into the building as fast as possible, so he can avoid participating in the conversation. He makes some vague noises of affirmation, then slips inside and shuts the door, cutting Vanessa off mid-sentence. She seems a bit taken aback, frowning at the door that Mike just disappeared through. Inside, Mike relaxes a little. He can acknowledge that maybe ignoring a police officer wasn't his best move, but she's done nothing but tell him how terrible the job is and how terrible he's doing at it. Honestly, doesn't she have anything better to do? It's as dark and dusty inside as ever. Mike doesn't linger too long this time, only taking a moment to peek behind the curtains and assure himself that everyone is in their proper place. In the office, he sits to wait for his shift to start, but he remembers something. Wasn't there a stack of maintenance guides somewhere in here? Dave hasn't gotten back to him, but maybe they can tell him a bit about what's going on. Once he finds them, though, the books seem to be a letdown. They're mostly instructions for repair and cleaning, which isn't what he needs. There's instructions for how to recalibrate animatronics if they start moving oddly during a performance, but nothing about them leaving the stage on their own. There's nothing to explain why they move at night, and definitely not anything to explain Chica's weird kitchen behavior. He gets a bit excited when he sees there's a section on changing the hours in which an animatronic is active, but when he turns there, he finds the pages have been ripped out. The whole thing is a total dead end. There's no time to mourn the loss, though. The cameras flicker on, and his shift starts. He sets aside the books and tries to focus. His problem the past few nights has been that he's left the office, which is clearly the wrong thing to do. But Mike thinks he understands the rules now. He just has to stay in the office and close the door if anyone comes to see him. He's still not sure what will happen if they catch him, but he's starting to think he never wants to know. As the night progresses, Mike sees that it's a good thing he started taking this more seriously. Both Bonnie and Chica move around a lot more, wandering around in unpredictable ways. The cameras aren't that reliable, and he loses track of them several times. They only show up at the doors a few times, but it's a few times too many for his taste. The fox looks like it moves too, slowly poking its nose out from the stage, but it looks like it ducks back a little whenever he looks at it, so he makes sure to cycle through every once in a while, just to see what's happening. We occasionally get shots of the battery meter as it slowly trickles down. The night is getting close to ending, but Mike's nerves are totally shot. Both Bonnie and Chica are at his doors, and he has a moment of hysterical rage as he yells at them to just leave already, come on! To his surprise, that seems to work. Bonnie is gone when he checks, and Chica leaves just a few seconds after. He's relieved, but the pause is interrupted by a new sound. A deep, unnatural laugh echoes through the building. For a second, all Mike can do is stand there, uncomprehending, frozen. Then he moves, quickly checking the cameras. What could have made a sound like that? He can hear Chica in the kitchen, and Bonnie doesn't look any different, so what was it? After a moment, he sees it. Freddy isn't on the main stage anymore. He cycles through the cameras a little frantically before he finally notices. In the dining area, there's a pair of eyes, just visible, shining from the dark. Through the speakers, he can just barely hear the sound of a music box playing. Mike can only stare. Everything he's experienced is weird, but this feels worse somehow. The idea of Freddy moving just feels bad. And those eyes shining in the dark, there's something here that isn't natural. Mike finds himself staring, unwilling and maybe even unable to take his eyes off of something that he knows somehow is dangerous. He flinches back suddenly as several images come flashing through his head. Orange and red, curtains caught in motion, a small sign flickering between "It's me" and "Sorry," out of order. As he startles backwards, the cameras change on their own, flipping to Pirate Cove. The fox is gone, the curtains still settling from a sudden departure. Mike switches the camera. Foxy is sprinting down the hall. Foxy lunges into the room with a scream, hook flashing through the air. Mike throws up his arms instinctively, falling as he's hit. Fox takes another step and freezes. From the floor, arms still up, Mike becomes aware of a different sound. His watch is beeping. It's 6 a.m. Foxy turns and leaves. His movements jerky and mechanical, totally different from the smooth running that just happened. Mike is stunned, unable to get up from the floor as the sounds of him leaving slowly fade. Eventually he gets up and numbly checks the cameras. Everyone is back in their proper places, like none of them ever moved at all. The camera shows that we were down to 2% before the clock rolled over. As adrenaline fades, Mike becomes more aware of the pain in his arm. There's a significant gash there, steadily trickling blood. Mike moves on autopilot, slowly heading towards the entrance. He's hurt. He got hurt at work. People get hurt at work sometimes. That's normal, right? He can deal with this. He has medical supplies at home, probably. Maybe. Just needs to get home. He's fine. It's fine. It's all fine. He can handle this. It's fine. He freezes as he reaches the dining area. Everything is quiet. Still. That should be a relief, but it just makes him tense up. He turns and stares at Pirate Cove, at the unmoving red curtains and the tiny sign reading, "Sorry," out of order. Mike's mind goes unbidden to the possibility. What would have happened if Foxy had been just a few seconds earlier? Bonnie's approach and Chica's chicken antics he can maybe blame on old, faulty machinery and programming gone strange, but Foxy? His arm curls around the still bleeding gash. This hadn't been a malfunctioning robot swinging wildly. There'd been intent in Foxy's movements. Foxy had wanted to hurt him, which means that, in all likelihood, everything here wants to hurt him. He remembers the eyes in the dark, the deep, echoing laugh. There's a level of unnatural here that defies any logical explanation he can come up with, and Mike feels with an awful certainty that something is deeply wrong with this place, and he's right in the middle of it. It's too much. Whatever was keeping Mike frozen snaps away as he rushes for the door, almost running. He needs to get out of here, to get away, get out of this building, to get in his car, drive away, and blast his music so he can stop thinking about what on earth he managed to get himself into. Whoa! Where are you going in such a hurry? Mike gets startled out of his spiral as Vanessa stops him at the door. He'd completely forgotten that she was probably out here. He tries to answer, but he's completely disoriented, his mind still running in circles around the idea that he needs to get out of here right now. Vanessa listens to him stammer before she starts her usual line of thinking, telling Mike that if he's this out of sorts from a simple night shift, he should probably work somewhere else. She goes to continue, but then she sees how Mike is gripping one of his arms. As she takes a closer look, she realizes he's been injured, and her demeanor completely changes. She seems genuinely concerned when she tells him that this needs to be looked at. Mike is even more confused at this change and tries to tell her it's fine, he can take care of it at home, but Vanessa isn't convinced. She insists that no, they need to look at this now, and immediately goes into the pizzeria he just ran out of. Mike is horrified and impulsively says, "No, don't!" as he follows her. He jolts to a stop as he enters and realizes what he's done. The dining area sits in front of him, empty and dusty as it ever was. Vanessa has stopped too, looking at him impatiently and asking, "What's the holdup?" Mike tries to answer, but he's at a loss. This place had felt so awful just a second ago, but coming in with another person, the panic he felt feels strange and out of place. Nothing about this place seems frightening now that it's past 6. What can he possibly say that wouldn't make him sound insane? Vanessa gets tired of waiting and puts a hand on his shoulder, leading him through the dining area. Mike lets her, although he can't help but stare at the stages as they pass. Vanessa sits Mike down in the office and finds an old first aid kit. She starts to bandage his arm, and in the quiet, Mike is calmed down enough to start to think properly, and the weirdness of the situation starts to set in a little bit. And as he looks at Vanessa, a small suspicion starts to grow in his mind. He asks her if she's done this before, and Vanessa says that first aid training is mandated for police officers. Mike clarifies that yes, he knows. He meant that she used this first aid kit before. It was stuffed behind several boxes, but she seemed to know exactly where it was. Vanessa's caught off guard, but she recovers, saying that it's logical for there to be a first aid kit in a security office. Mike isn't convinced, but Vanessa counters with a question of her own, asking him to explain how he got this weirdly serious injury while working a supposedly boring security job. Mike doesn't know how to answer that. He eventually says that he just got distracted. Wasn't paying enough attention to what was going on. Vanessa doesn't push for a greater answer. She finishes with the bandage and starts putting everything away. That done, she turns back to him. "You know, Mike, I really think you should look into working somewhere else." Unlike the other times Vanessa has suggested it, the tone isn't condescending. She sounds genuinely concerned, which Mike picks up on. If you got an injury like that, just from being distracted, maybe you should look at some other places. Mike finds it a lot harder to brush aside what she says after what happened. And even if she's not willing to talk about it, she seems to know more about the danger here than she's letting on. But I can't lose this job. Look, Mike, if it's a pride thing, it's normal to leave a job. No, it's not a pride thing. Look, you've been around for days now. Clearly you've read all about me, so you know why I can't just find something else. No, I don't. What? I can't just look up whoever I want. You can only look at someone's records if they're involved in a case you're working on. Whatever it is you've done, I don't know about it. Oh. So... right, yeah. Mike explains the recent assault charge and how that, combined with his bad employment record, makes it pretty hard to find work. When Vanessa looks like she might interrupt, he continues, saying that he knows he can probably find something better eventually, but he needs a job for this weekend specifically. He tells her that his sister, Abby, is in custody with their aunt, and if he wants to be able to see her at all, he needs to have a job by this weekend. That was the deal. This is his last chance to show his aunt that he really wants to be a good brother, and he's not just some delinquent who's wasted his life. Vanessa's quiet for a moment. She seems somber and conflicted. She carefully says, "That's a rough situation, and Mike can do what he wants, but she really thinks he should get a different job as soon as possible." In her tone, there's a hint of resignation, like she knows she's not going to be able to convince him. After a moment, Mike tells her that he really does need this job. It comes out like an apology, even though he's not sure what he's apologizing for. As the two leave, Vanessa makes an offhand comment, saying that maybe it'll be different for Mike. People don't usually last this long. Mike is understandably alarmed and asks her, can she please explain what that means? Vanessa, in a tone that sounds suspiciously like she accidentally said too much, says, people move on to other things. What else could she have meant? Mike is a bit dubious about this, and once they get outside, she asks if there's anything else he should know, because Vanessa seems to know a lot more than he does about this. For a second, Vanessa looks like she might answer honestly, but then she brushes it off. She claims that everything she talked about can easily be observed from the outside. She doesn't know any more than anyone else. She tells Mike to get home safe, and then she's gone. Mike leaves as well after a moment, full of confusion and stuck on the idea that whatever unnatural things he's facing here, it looks like he's going to be facing them by himself. We cut to an establishing shot of Abby's school. It's Thursday morning, but instead of following Abby, we see Aunt Jane waiting impatiently by the front office. Eventually the secretary tells her that the headmaster is ready to see her. As Jane enters, the headmaster greets her cheerfully, joking that he hopes she didn't mind waiting. Jane doesn't answer. It's clear that she in fact did mind waiting, but she's just polite enough not to say it out loud. The headmaster asks her why she's come in today. Jane collects herself and starts to explain that she's very concerned about her niece, Abby. When she enrolled Abby here, she'd been reassured that the school provided a wholesome and supportive environment for its students. And yet, every day, Abby comes home looking absolutely miserable. Something is clearly wrong, and Jane would like the school to look into it. The headmaster is very dismissive of this. He hasn't heard anything from Abby's teachers. Children have unpredictable mood swings, and they can be so dramatic. Little Abby is probably just wanting some attention, that's all. Jane does not take this dismissal well. She repeats her concern, her politeness getting a lot more sharp and backhanded. In return, the headmaster starts to get defensive, saying that nothing untoward has ever happened at this school under his watch. As the two argue, there are various scenes interspersed of Abby having a bad time at school, which shows that the headmaster is really only interested in looking like he's managing things well. Outside the window, we can see a purple car sitting in the parking lot. During the argument, the headmaster brings up Mike and says that maybe some of his attention-seeking tendencies are rubbing off on Abby. Jane snaps at the headmaster, telling him to leave her nephew out of this, which is a surprise both to the headmaster and Jane herself. She stands her ground, though, saying that Michael is making good strides toward being a functional member of society, and even if he wasn't, that would be none of the headmaster's business. Finally, the headmaster relents slightly, telling Jane that perhaps she's right. Even though things are going well, there's always improvements to be made. He very grudgingly says he'll look into it. Jane can see that he's probably lying through his teeth, but she's smart enough to see that she hasn't been getting anywhere with this. She leaves the building frustrated and unsure of where to go from here. Outside, she contemplates smoking a cigarette, but it's close to the end of the school day, so she restrains herself and settles for impatiently waiting instead. As she waits, the purple car drives away, and Jane finds herself disgusted again. Really, that's such an awful color for a car. Eventually, the school day ends, and Abby trudges to the car. Jane tentatively asks how the day was, and Abby just shrugs. Jane is now pretty convinced that there's something going wrong at the school, but trying to ask about it doesn't seem to have helped in the past, so she instead mentions that it's a nice day out, and maybe they can spend some time in the garden when they get home. Abby looks up a little at this, but she's too downtrodden to summon a lot of interest, so she just shrugs again. Aunt Jane decides to count this as maybe a win and takes them both home. In Mike's apartment, we see him pacing back and forth, despite looking absolutely exhausted. His fear and confusion from the night before have become restlessness that he's clearly having trouble dealing with. He keeps picking at the bandage on his arm, repeating the conversation and events from the night before in his head. In particular, his mind focuses on the Foxy encounter. Something had warned him, helped him to see the danger before it was coming. What had it been? After a moment, he heads to the bedroom and roots around in the bottom of his drawer. Shoved underneath everything else, there's a worn photograph. It's a photo of Mike's entire family, including himself, young, and Garrett. The outfits they were wearing match the ones that he and Garrett are wearing in the dreams. Mike starts pacing the living room again, slower as he looks at the photograph. Deep in thought, he turns to look at his work jacket, draped over the back of the couch. Is it possible? Is Garrett somehow connected to what he's been experiencing? Eventually he sighs and sits down on the couch, putting the photo on the side table so he can bury his face in his hands. This is all too much right now. Too much maybe ever. He eventually picks up the remote and turns on the TV, hoping for some distraction. It's still on the vampire soap opera from the night before. The woman on screen, apparently named Clara, is lamenting that she doesn't think she can go through with the wedding. She thought she could handle everything, but she's become entangled in something she just can't understand. Mike raises an eyebrow. The show seems more relatable than he thought. He settles in to try and forget his own supernatural experiences as Clara continues to talk about how she just didn't know what she was getting into. Back with Aunt Jane, she and Abby are sitting on the back patio. Abby has a book in her lap and is alternating between reading and drawing on a different piece of paper. She seems a bit happier than in the car. Jane has a book too, but she's spending more time looking at Abby than actually reading it. Abby occasionally sneaks glances at her aunt too. Seeing that her aunt seems like she's in a good mood, Abby works up some courage and asks if she really has to go to school tomorrow. Aunt Jane says that getting an education is important, and she can't just not go to school. Abby gets a little glum and annoyed, and grudgingly says, okay. Jane asks why she wouldn't want to go to school, and Abby doesn't answer. Jane tries again, saying that she can't help if she doesn't know what the problem is. Abby clams up even more, defensively insisting that it's fine, whatever. Jane gives up. She's annoyed, but she's also berating herself for somehow managing to say the wrong thing again. With both of them now unhappy, she considers her options, before seeming to come to a decision. She tells Abby that Michael called earlier this week asking how she was. So, if Abby wants to, they can give him a call. Abby is completely thrown off. After confirming that yes, Aunt Jane is serious, and no, she is not joking, Abby is very excited and says, yes, she wants to call Mike. Jane is very pleased she got such a positive response. Her half-hearted admonishment for Abby to calm down is clearly more out of habit than anything else. She goes inside to make a call, telling Abby that she'll get her once she has Mike on the line. Back with Mike, he's become fully immersed in watching the show. Clara has continued her monologue, wondering if this relationship can work, or if the world the Count comes from is just too different from her own. Should she try and understand it, or is she better off running away? The loud ringing of the phone interrupts, and Mike jumps so badly he falls off the couch. Once he realizes it's the phone, he goes to answer, even though he's very confused. People don't call him, so he doesn't have any idea what this could be about. The confusion continues when he finds that Aunt Jane has called him. She says that she got his message, and Mike does his best to hide that he's surprised she listened to it. He asks how Abby's been, and Jane admits that she's not been doing well, and she's pretty sure it has something to do with school. She asks if Mike can try and get her to talk about it, and Mike readily agrees. Jane says she'll get Abby in a minute, but how has Mike been doing? This is another thing Mike did not expect her to ask in a million years, and he does his best to answer honestly without revealing the fact that his workplace is almost definitely cursed. Outside, Abby is waiting impatiently. Aunt Jane is taking a while. Maybe she should just follow her inside? Hello? Looking up, Abby sees that Dave is leaning on the back fence. She asks what he's doing there, and he says that Mike asked him to check on her again. How has she been? Abby gets a bit mad at him because he disappeared the other day, and then the other kids made fun of her, saying she had an imaginary friend. Dave says that, oh, he's so sorry. He had to leave suddenly. He didn't realize it would cause her trouble. Abby looks like she might stay mad, but she remembers what she's waiting for and excitedly tells Dave that she's about to talk to Mike right now. Dave gets alarmed, then tries to cover it up, suggesting that maybe she shouldn't talk to Mike. Abby is very incredulous, so Dave changes tactics, saying he just doesn't want Abby to spoil the surprise he has planned. Abby's curious now, and Dave explains that if Abby tells Mike that Dave visited, the surprise will be ruined. Abby points out that if Mike asked Dave to check on her, wouldn't he already know about this surprise? Dave struggles to justify this, before eventually saying that Mike asked him to check, but didn't say when, so he doesn't know Dave is here right now, just that he might be. Before Abby can question this, he changes tactics again, snapping that Abby knows how hard Mike works. Doesn't Mike deserve a nice surprise? What, does Abby want to ruin it for her brother? Abby's taken aback by this change in tone and backs down, saying no, she doesn't want to ruin anything. Dave, feeling back in control, slips back into casualness, telling Abby that it's alright. He knows she wouldn't do something like that. She can really help him out by just not telling Mike he visited. Just yet. Back with Jane and Mike, it seems like Mike has accidentally let slip that he got hurt at work. Jane is demanding to know what happened, and Mike is trying to backpedal, saying that he's fine, he just wasn't paying attention. No, he's fine. Someone already looked at it. It's not that bad. Jane isn't convinced, but she realizes she's been talking to Mike a while, and Abby is probably getting impatient, so she lets it go for now. She tells Mike they can talk about it more on Saturday. It sounds more like a demand than a suggestion coming from her, and that she's going to get Abby now. Dave has managed to convince Abby not to tell anyone about him being here. He promises her that he'll even let her help with the surprise. And how would you look at that time? He has to go, bye. Abby's a little mad that he's suddenly left again, but she forgets about it when Jane calls her and tells her Mike's on the phone. Jane doesn't see anyone when she looks out into the yard. Jane leaves Abby and Mike alone to talk, and Abby starts telling Mike all about this new book she's read. The two have a sweet conversation for a while before Mike asks her about school. Once again, Abby shuts down and unconvincingly says that it's been fine. Mike gently tells her that Aunt Jane says it seems like she's having a hard time, and he'd like to know what's really going on, if she wants to talk about it. Abby's been holding this secret in for a while, and the knowledge that Mike sort of already knows is enough to push her over the edge. She tearfully opens up and tells him about all the bullying that's been going on, and how she's tried to ignore it like he told her to, but it just keeps getting worse. She's been trying really hard not to cause any problems for Aunt Jane, but it's been awful, and she hates going to school so much. As she keeps talking, Mike finds himself getting more and more angry. The phone cord doesn't leave much room for pacing, but he tries for it anyway. He looks like he's ready to walk out the door and go fight a bunch of 10-year-olds, but as much as he wants to, he knows that Abby needs more than his anger right now. So he takes a breath and does his best to be calm as he asks her if she's tried to tell anyone about it. She says she's tried, but they always think she's making it up for attention. Even the ones that see it going on don't seem to care at all. Mike has to take a second to calm down again, but when he does speak, he firmly tells her that none of this is her fault. This shouldn't be happening, and he's so sorry that it is, and that it's been going on for so long. Once she seems to accept that, he thanks her for telling him. He adds that he thinks she needs to tell Aunt Jane, too. Abby protests that no, she doesn't want to cause any problems. And Mike says that when he told her to try, he meant for things like eating vegetables and going to bed. Not this. This is serious, and it's something that she needs to know about. As much as he and Aunt Jane don't understand or sometimes even like each other, they both want Abby to be safe and happy. He doesn't think he can fix this, but maybe Aunt Jane can. Abby takes a second to think about this, and as she does, Mike tells her that if for whatever reason he's wrong and Aunt Jane doesn't help, he wants Abby to start fighting back. Abby protests that you're not supposed to fight, and Mike admits that, yes, in most cases, you shouldn't be fighting with just anybody. But if someone is hurting you, you should be fighting back. Mike reassures her that if it comes down to it, he knows she'll be able to do it. I don't feel like I can do anything. I'm just scared all the time. Well, you don't have to be not scared to do things. A lot of people are scared all the time. I'm scared a lot of the time. The trick is to just do it anyway, even if you're terrified. Abby finds it hard to believe that Mike is scared of anything. Mike almost wants to laugh. He tells her that there are many things he's scared of, but he does his best to do what he needs to anyway. With this new idea integrated into her worldview, Abby promises that if she has to, she'll fight. Mike is relieved, and aiming for a lighter tone, he says she'll have to come up with some sort of special move to take down her bullies next time she sees them. He goes on to describe all sorts of silly moves, each one getting more crazy than the last, and by the time he's done, Abby is giggling and seems to be feeling better. As the goofing winds down, Abby gets a bit thoughtful, then tells Mike that she thinks she does want to tell Aunt Jane. The two exchange goodbyes, with Abby promising to tell Mike how it goes, and then Abby hangs up. She starts running towards the living room. There's a moment of hesitation when she sees Aunt Jane and doesn't want to be a bother, but she remembers Mike's words and continues forward. The scene ends with it implied that she told Aunt Jane everything she told Mike. Mike hangs up the phone and sits down. He looks more tired than ever, but the anger is still there. It's been fueled by the restlessness from earlier. After a second of stewing, he goes to the bedroom. He looks at the picture Abby gave him, then at the bed. He glares stubbornly at it before climbing in. This time, when Garrett appears, Mike doesn't wait. Unlike previous nights where he was running on instinct and habit, he's fully sprinting now, trying to catch up to Garrett in any way he can. Instead of pausing when Garrett disappears into the pizzeria, Mike enters right away. Even so, Garrett's nowhere to be found once he gets inside. Mike starts looking around for his younger brother, but he notices that the pizzeria isn't as full as it was in the other dreams. It's still decently busy, but it's nowhere near as packed. The general atmosphere is different too. There's less employees than before, and many of the parents look stressed, even though they're supposed to be celebrating. Mike can hear more of their words now, though not enough to really understand what's going on. Eventually, one word stands out, repeating, a name. There's a mother pacing around the restaurant, calling for someone named Fritz. As she's moving around, Mike can see movement under one of the tables. When he bends down, he sees a faceless child, hiding. This child is dressed like a pirate, with a plastic fake hook on one hand. They're giggling, clearly enjoying the game of hide-and-seek, even though their mom isn't. The child jumps out from the table and takes off running, startling an employee that came to clear the table. By now, Mike has the instinct of following faceless dream children, so he runs after them. The child sprints away, managing to stay out of their mother's sight as they reach the closed pirate cove and hide behind the curtains. They occasionally peek out, ducking back inside and laughing every time it seems like someone might turn and see them. It's an endearing sight, which makes the appearance of the golden rabbit much more ominous. The rabbit approaches, clearly having seen the movement in the curtains. It starts to speak, and Mike is surprised that he can almost pick up some of what it's saying. After some coaxing, the rabbit and Fritz start a conversation. The sound is still very distorted, but Mike picks up on the fact that the rabbit is suggesting it knows a great hiding place. The child gets excited, and the rabbit points to the staff-only door that we've seen many times before, suggesting that they race for it. Mike feels cold. When the child sprints for the door, the rabbit follows almost casually, clearly not in any hurry. Mike tries to run too, maybe to get to the door first, but once again, he can't move or make any progress. Fritz is a bit too short to open the door easily, but they manage it and vanish into the hallway beyond. The rabbit follows and the door shuts behind them both. Mike had managed to get close, but as always, he's just a little too late. He slams his hands into the door, yelling for it to open. He may as well have been hitting a brick wall. The sound of the mother calling for her child starts to rise in volume, getting more concerned and frantic. Mike keeps banging on the door, but it holds firm. He eventually tries to slam it with his shoulder, but instead of making contact, he falls straight through, down into darkness. He wakes as his shoulder slams it painfully into the floor. He lays there, trying to recover. He'd expected the dream this time, but that didn't make it any easier. Doing this every night feels like it's starting to take a toll. When Mike pulls up to the pizzeria, Vanessa's already there. She asks how his arm is, and the two have a semi-casual conversation while Mike opens the gate. It's a bit stilted, but it's much better than the greetings Mike is used to from her. When Mike goes to open the door, though, Vanessa stops him when she asks if he really wants to go in tonight. She plays it off as concern for his safety based on the mysterious injury from last night, but there's a gravity in the way she speaks that shows she knows more of the true danger here. Mike is more receptive to her concern, but still ultimately says that he'll be fine. Like he said, he just wasn't paying attention. He'll do better tonight. After he enters, the camera lingers on Vanessa. Once Mike is out of sight, most of the professional composure drains from her face. After a moment of trying to look through the murky glass of the door, she goes back to her cruiser and sits on the hood to wait. Her eyes get distant as she watches. She's waited like this before, many times, and it's never been pleasant for her when the next morning comes. By now, she knows better than to be hopeful for anything else. Mike carefully crosses the dining area. It's not midnight yet, but he still feels the need to be cautious. As he's passing Pirate Cove, though, he hesitates. After staring at the closed curtains for a moment, he steels himself and calls out, "Fritz?" His voice sounds too loud. "Fritz? Are you there?" The silence remains. Nothing moves. After a second, Mike shakes his head and heads to the office, feeling stupid. What had he been expecting? Some spectral child to leap out and say boo? He needs to stop letting all this get to him. As he settles in for the night, he focuses on what he said to Vanessa. He's going to be fine. He was caught off guard last time, but he knows what to expect now, so he'll get through this. As the night progresses, it becomes clear that getting through this is easier said than done. Mike thought Bonnie and Chica were active yesterday, but that was nothing compared to how it is today. It feels like Foxy is constantly trying to make a run for the office, which makes watching the bunny and chicken even harder. And every once in a while, there's a deep, distorted laugh, and Mike finds that Freddy has moved closer to the office. His power is getting lower, and as we keep getting glances at it, it doesn't seem like he's going to have enough. Chica shows up at the door, and to Mike's horror, she doesn't leave. At least, not quickly enough. There's nothing he can do except watch the percentage fall to 1, then to 0. Then... Mike's panicked breathing is the only remaining sound. His eyes adjust to the dark, and he can just barely see Chica in the doorway, unmoving, watching him. Heavy footsteps. That music box he's been faintly hearing begins to play as a pair of glowing eyes appear in the darkness. Mike looks around, frantic, but there's nowhere to go. There's nothing he can do except watch as the song winds to a close and the eyes flicker out. Mike can't get free of Freddy's grip, no matter what he tries. He scrambles at the floor to try and grip something, anything, but any hold he has, he's quickly wrenched away from. He looks past Freddy and he sees Bonnie next to the open door of the employees-only closet. Mike's head begins to fill with noise, and his vision is obscured when rapid-fire images overlay what's in front of him. There's Freddy, screaming, red, so many things going on at once, but prominent among these images. He sees the spare Freddy in that room. Blood is dripping from the joints, pooling on the table and floor, with a pair of human eyes popping out of the front of the mask. In the few places not obscured by shadow and blood, you can see the tattered remains of a security jacket, torn to pieces the same way the body was. Having seen a glimpse of his fate, Might is slammed back into reality, and he starts struggling even harder to get away. As Freddy tries to pull him into the closet, he grabs the door frame and tries to pull himself back out. For a second, it looks like he's actually managed to get free, but then Bonnie appears, lifting him off his feet and slamming him into the wall. Mike is stunned momentarily, and he catches sight of Freddy, pulling the outer casing off of the spare Freddy. The inside is full of crossbeams and wiring, and the mechanisms securing it to the animatronic gleam in the dim light. Freddy approaches and starts to push the mask onto Mike's face. Mike has one arm free and tries to keep the thing away from him, but it's clear that Freddy is much, much stronger. The noise in Mike's head keeps getting louder, seeming almost frantic. Just before the mask reaches his face, the light in the closet flickers on. Everyone looks up as the light begins to shine, getting brighter and brighter. The noise in Mike's head rises with the light, growing to the point that it seems impossible that he's the only one hearing it. It rises and rises until the light blows out, shattering in a shower of sparks and glass. Mike's ears are ringing as the room grows dark again. Mike is dropped to the floor, and the animatronics stiffly shuffle away. Eventually, distantly, Mike hears his watch beeping. 6 a.m. He made it. There's a bit of pre-dawn light leaking in from the hallway, and Mike can see the outline of the mask that was nearly shoved on his face. The distant sound of his watch is overtaken by his beating heart. His breathing quickens. He can't stop staring at it. His mind flashes back to the images from before as he stares at the dark stains around the eye holes. Just barely audible above the heartbeat, we hear someone calling Mike's name. The muffled voice gets closer and closer, and we eventually see it's Vanessa. She kneels next to Mike and tries to talk to him, but he can't process her presence, eyes still locked on the fallen mask. Vanessa helps him get up and starts leading him out of the restaurant, talking to him as she tries her best to bring him out of it. As they leave, Mike glances back one more time at the dark closet. The shadows look like they've risen, swallowing any detail of what might be inside. We cut to a shot of a diner, Sparky's Diner. The sky is gray outside, but the lighting inside the diner is soft and warm. Music from the overhead speakers is tuned to a local radio station, who announces that it's early Friday morning. Hope y'all are looking forward to the weekend. Generic music begins playing softly after that. The few customers that are there are sleepily eating breakfast. In comparison to where we just were, this place is calm and inviting. Mike and Vanessa are seated at a booth across from each other. A waitress comes by and gives Vanessa a cup of coffee. She nods in thanks before looking across at Mike. He's staring out the window, occasionally taking sips from a glass of ice water. There's blood crusted around a few of his fingernails, and he looks exhausted and wrecked, but more present than he was previously. Hey, you back with us? Yeah, thanks. Sure. It's a nice place. Thanks. It's, good in the mornings. Quiet. There's a bit of silence after that. Vanessa stirs some cream into her coffee as she considers how to bring up what she wants to talk about. She eventually decides to just start talking. She calls to Mike and tells him that she really thinks he should get a different job. Mike just sighs and asks if they can please not talk about this right now. He's bone-tired, and he doesn't have the energy to get into an argument, and he really doesn't want to deeply consider the fact that he was seconds away from dying. Vanessa says they need to talk about it, and asks that he just hear her out for a minute. She knows about his situation with his aunt and sister, but that can't be the end-all be-all, right? Vanessa points out that he has a pretty obvious injury. The way Mike talked about his aunt, she seems stern, but not heartless. He doesn't have to go into detail, but if he explains that his new job ended up being dangerous, Vanessa really thinks his aunt will understand. Isn't it worth a try? Mike is quiet as he seriously considers her words, before his eyes become focused and he looks at Vanessa. She knows quite a bit about how dangerous it is, doesn't she? It's not really a question. Mike is stating a fact, something he's become sure of. Vanessa opens her mouth, then looks away. She can't bring herself to deny it, not anymore. Mike leans forward. He points out several times in the past when Vanessa has let something slip and revealed that she knows more about what's happening. Vanessa stays quiet, but she's getting increasingly uncomfortable and nervous. She takes sips of coffee she doesn't seem to taste. Mike gets more confident at this silent admission of guilt and says if she knows anything about what's going on, then she needs to tell him about it. Before he can get further, Vanessa cuts him off. I can't tell you. Can't or won't. I can't. I'm sorry. I can't. Mike sits back, frustrated. The two are silent again, at a bit of an impasse. Mike eventually leans forward again, and admits that she is right. This job is dangerous, and his relationship with his aunt has been getting better. They probably, honestly, could work something out. But there's another reason he stayed as long as he has. Vanessa's intrigued, and Mike decides to take a chance. He tells her that he used to have another sibling, a younger brother, named Garrett. Their dad had been having a stressful time at work, so they went on a camping trip as a family to try and get away for a bit. And for the first several days, everything was fine. Great, even. Until the last day of their trip. Mike was supposed to be watching Garrett, but got distracted. Not for long, just for a second. But that second was enough. While he wasn't watching, someone took Garrett. Mike saw the car driving away and he chased after it, but there was nothing he could do. As Mike tells the story, Vanessa looks quietly horrified. She asks if they ever found who took Garrett. Mike tells her no. The police never found Garrett or the man who kidnapped him. His family just wasn't the same after that. When their mom died, their dad couldn't handle another loss and left. He pauses then. This is clearly something that's not easy for him to talk about. Vanessa quietly tells him that she's so sorry that happened to Mike and his family. There's a raw sincerity there that catches Mike a little off guard. He says thank you after a moment, then continues. He tells her ever since he's been working at Freddy's, he's been having dreams. He's always had nightmares about Garrett's kidnapping, but these are different. This feels like Garrett is there somehow, leading him to things, showing him things. He keeps dreaming of Freddy, seeing other kids he can't identify. He's starting to think he's seeing bits of things that actually happened in the past. And he thinks that whatever happened to Garrett is connected to these other kids, and it's all connected to Freddy's. Mike looks up for the first time in a while and sees Vanessa's tense expression. He shrinks back a little, suddenly wondering if he should have told her any of this. But it's too late to go back now, so he finishes, much more nervous. I know it sounds insane, but it feels like staying at Freddy's is the key to figuring out what happened to my brother. There's no change in Vanessa's face, and he sinks down, dejected. And saying all this makes me think I've probably just gone crazy. Vanessa looks pained. She grips the cup and takes a deep breath, clearly bracing herself. I don't think you're crazy, Mike. I think you're in over your head. I meant what I said. I can't tell you what's going on. But I can tell you that people who keep going into that building, they don't come out again. You need to let it go. Vanessa, Mike, trust me. There are some things you're better off not knowing. Vanessa abruptly stands, fumbling with her wallet. Mike is confused and stands as well, trying to catch up as she slaps some bills on the table and walks quickly towards the front door. He calls for her to wait, but she doesn't slow down, pushing out into the parking lot. Vanessa, are you okay?
Just let it go, Mike!
Some things are just better forgotten. You know how dangerous Freddy's is. You got lucky tonight. Do you think that luck's gonna hold? You have a chance to get out. Please. Take it. Mike stares at her, not sure how to respond. Vanessa eventually sighs, looking tired and sad. Come on, let's get you home. Vanessa drives them back to Freddy's so Mike can grab his own car. As he's about to get out of the cruiser, he hesitates. Hey, I know you're pretty set on not telling me anything, but it feels like you've been trying to help me anyway. So if you need any help, just ask. Vanessa seems surprised and gives him a rueful smile he can almost pretend is real. Worry about yourself, Mike. I've been doing this a while. I'll be fine. She tells him goodnight and drives away. Mike watches her go, then gets in his own car and slowly starts to make his way home. He's lost in his thoughts. His mind won't stop replaying what happened. Vanessa's cryptic warning echoes in his mind, but equally loud is the memory of a mother calling frantically for her child. He wants to listen to Vanessa, but this could be the key to knowing what happened to his brother, the key to maybe making up for his greatest mistake. The intensity of the scene rises until Mike abruptly swerves to the side of the road, parking the car and cutting the engine. From the change in daylight, it looks like he's just been driving aimlessly for hours, stewing in his thoughts. He scrubs his face with his hands, clearly conflicted. There's a scene change, and we find ourselves in Abby's room. She was sleeping, but she's roused as she hears muffled shouting. As she heads downstairs, we can hear that it's Aunt Jane, yelling at someone over the phone, demanding to speak to their superior. Abby, more awake now, watches from the kitchen doorway as her aunt paces. Through her dialogue, we can tell that she's trying to reach the headmaster of Abby's school, but apparently he's taken vacation and can't be reached. As she's winding up to start shouting again, Aunt Jane realizes that she has an audience. She's somewhat mortified, but tries to recover as she tells the person on the line to just wait a moment. She covers the receiver and primly says she's sorry if she woke Abby. How did you sleep? Abby is both confused and worried by this turn of events. She asks what's wrong, and Jane explains that she's just calling the school to take care of the problem Abby's been dealing with. There's a muffled voice coming through the speaker, and Jane snaps that yes, she's still here. Jane suggests that Abby just go play in her room for a minute. She'll talk to her when the call is over. Abby is conflicted and asks what her aunt's planning to do. Jane starts to answer, but she's interrupted again by the secretary. Frustrated, she just tells Abby to go to her room and play. She's not sending Abby to school today, so why doesn't she just go have some fun? She'll explain it all later. Abby reluctantly goes to her room as the heated conversation starts up again behind her. Back in her room, Abby is worried. Just a day ago, she would have given anything to stay home from school, but now, with her aunt's angry voice filtering through the door, she can't feel anything but anxious. She doesn't feel like doing anything, so she just gets under the covers and waits. She hopes that Mike is right, and Jane is fixing this and not making it worse. We're back with Mike. He's driving again, and he parks his car in front of an old and regal-looking building that we haven't seen before. As he climbs the stairs and pushes through the glass door, we can see that it's a public library. The inside is quiet and calm, if a little empty. Not many people go to the library so early in the morning. Mike approaches the front desk and asks if the library has some sort of archive of local history. They do have one, and it's apparently in the basement somewhere. The directions he receives are somewhat convoluted. He descends some stairs and tries his best to follow the directions, but gets turned around. As he's trying to get his bearings, he hears some voices arguing. He finds there's a group of people arguing in a small conference room. Apparently it's a meeting for a book club. They're talking about a series called Psychic Friend Fred Boy or something. The members of this club are various FNAF theorists. Matt, Pat, and Dako are having a heated argument, while Koryax Kenshin watches in confusion. Look, it's just a theory, but it's the only thing that makes sense. No, it's not! You saw the Easter egg in Fred Boy in Space. He looks in the mirror and he sees glowing, robotic eyes staring back. What more do you need? That was visual storytelling to foreshadow him being afraid of becoming like his unfeeling father. It's not meant to literally be Fred Boy. Wait, I thought the video games weren't canon? Jocko groans in annoyance, while Ness grimaces. Markiplier's sitting in the corner, snacking on some chips, clearly content to just watch this play out. They take place in their own continuity, so technically they're non-canon, but they sometimes reference the books, so they might be an attempt to clarify what's happening in the main series. No one is really sure. Well, that's just confusing. Wait until you hear about the board game. Excuse me? Sorry to interrupt, but do you guys know where the archive is? Oh yeah, sure. Just go down this hall until it splits. On the right there's some stairs that go down a bit more. Walk left again and it's at the end of the hall. Yeah, it might be behind some boxes. Watch out for that. Right, thanks. No problem. Good luck. Safe travels. What a nice guy. Yeah, almost as nice as Fred Boy's grandma.
I'm telling you, that woman is suspicious.
Mike manages to find the archive with the extra directions. It's dim and dusty and clearly doesn't get many visitors. Shelves are packed with various boxes, binders, and piles of old paper that make their area feel slightly claustrophobic. There's a paper taped to the front desk that gives a basic rundown of how everything is organized and several stern warnings about putting things back when you're done. What follows is a montage of Mike searching through the archives. He's there for a while, with only the first part of a name and a vague notion that what he's looking for happened in the 80s. There's a lot to get through. As he searches, he finds a depressing number of missing child reports, but nothing that matches what he's seen. As he's opening another binder, he freezes. A name jumps out at him. Fritz Smith. Numbly, he takes in the sentence around the name. Police are suspending their search. Nothing has been found of the missing child. Above the clipping is a label for the section. Fazbear Pizza Disappearances. Almost on autopilot, Mike turns the page, and he's met with more cutouts from different articles. The scraps of paper chronicle an escalating situation. 1 child, then 2, then 3 vanish. By the 3rd, the town is distraught and angry, both at the police force and the restaurant. When a 4th child goes missing, Freddy's is temporarily shut down, as the police did a thorough investigation of the staff and premises. It seems that even with all their efforts, nothing was ever found. The reputation of the restaurant took a big hit following the disappearances. It tried to continue for a while, but news reports of lack of sanitation made a bad situation worse. Apparently, the animatronics in particular smelled awful. The place eventually closed down for good. Nothing about the children was ever found, it seems. At one of the last articles, Mike stops. Staring up at him are 4 small, black and white photographs. Beneath each is a name and description, asking readers to call the police if you see them. Mike can't stop staring. His eyes automatically trace over the names. Jeremy, Susie, Fritz, and Gabriel. The photos are grainy and faded with age, but there's no doubt. These are the faceless children Mike has seen in his dreams. The room feels colder now, more oppressive. Mike had suspected for a while that there was something unnatural about what was happening. He'd somewhat accepted the abstract idea that his workplace might be haunted by child ghosts, but there was nothing abstract about the children in front of him. These were kids who'd been kidnapped and were never seen again, with no trace of them ever being found. Except they had been seen again, hadn't they? Mike had seen them. If these are truly the children from his dreams, then Mike could very well be the only witness to their kidnappings. He'd be the last person to have seen them alive. He'd been the last person to see Garrett alive, too. At the thought, the pictures in front of him suddenly warp, eyes black and mouths gaping. Mike lurches to his feet, startled. Before he can recover, new images flash through his mind. A dark hallway, an empty kitchen, a small stage with closed curtains. Mike knows what this is by now. Whatever's been helping him, telling him things, is trying to talk to him again. This is different than before. Whatever it is isn't waiting for him to fall asleep. There's an insistence to it now, a desperation. Mike didn't think this could happen to him outside of the restaurant. thought of it is terrifying. Mike hurries to leave, panic gripping at him as he runs up the stairs. What was he thinking coming here? What is he supposed to do with this information? As if in reply, more images. Red and blue, flashing lights, the murmur of a radio, fluorescent light glinting off a badge. Mike comes back to himself in time to avoid falling down the front steps. He stammers out loud that he can't go to the police. What is he supposed to say? That he witnessed a decade-old crime in his dreams? That the animatronic rabbit did it? Mike pushes away the images that appear in response as he hurries down the stairs and towards his car. He thought researching this would help, but now it's becoming clear that Vanessa was right. He is in way, way over his head. He gets in the car and fumbles to start it as the presence pushes at his mind. More images appear, almost aggressive as they flash by. A pair of desperate parents, an abandoned birthday party watched by a golden rabbit, a smear of red on a backstage door. Mike's panic is reaching a crescendo. He calls out that he doesn't want this. He doesn't know what this thing's trying to tell him. Who are you? There's a split second where the visions stop, as if in shock. Then it all slams back, loud and aggressive and laced with desperation. A child's voice warped almost beyond comprehension as it screams, "It's me!" The words hit like a physical blow. Reality disappears completely, superseded by another. He's still in a car, but it's not his car. Unlike his dreams, he's not watching from the outside. Mike finds himself staring through someone else's eyes, someone much smaller than him. Through the back window, there's someone running toward the car, but they can't keep up. They're not fast enough. The line of sight turns slowly towards the driver's seat. Whoever is driving is covered in shadows, seemingly more silhouette than person. The car moves quickly through a rapidly darkening forest, and Mike senses apprehension from the eyes he's looking through. The driver seems to sense it too. It turns its head. A smile splits the darkness of its face. Shining teeth stand out from the blackness, bright and twisted with anticipation disguised as reassurance. The car lurches and Mike stumbles. He's back in his own body, in a familiar forest clearing. Garrett stands in front of him, staring as Mike attempts to catch his breath. There's more emotion in his eyes than was there previously, something between frustration and hope. "Garrett." For the first time, Garrett responds, giving a slight nod. It's you, right? You've been showing me these things?" Again, there's a nod, then an impatient shuffle. The frustration has given way to impatience, and Garrett turns and runs to the edge of the trees, looking back and waving for Mike to follow. Mike hasn't recovered from what he just saw and weakly calls out for him to wait, but Garrett doesn't seem to hear as he runs off. Mike follows as best he can, but the most he can manage is a stumbling speed walk. Garrett frequently stops to make sure he's still following, urgently beckoning him forward. The desperation in his body language is obvious, but it's a child's desperation. The desperation that comes from not having the words you need and trying to get someone to understand anyway. Mike follows in a daze. They emerge from the trees to slowly flashing blue and red lights. Garrett quickly vanishes through the front door of the building, but Mike stops to take in what's happening. There are several police cruisers parked in front of the restaurant, sirens off, but lights still flashing as several officers put crime scene tape in front of the doors. 2 more officers are trying to placate a sizable crowd out front, which is a mix of insistent reporters and distraught parents. The officers are trying to reassure the public that they have this well in hand, but it's clear that the people of the town are restless and afraid. Several voices stand out, demanding to know how they can trust that the police will do as they promise. Mike recognizes one of the voices as Fritz's mother. The scene hits a little close to home, and Mike looks away, following Garrett's path inside. The sounds from outside abruptly cut off as the door shuts. The inside of the building is cold, dark, and empty, as if all the air has been sucked out. At the center of the room, a large table has been decorated for a birthday, balloons and streamers proudly telling the world the happy news. Plates of half-eaten pizza sit next to toppled chairs. A pile of presents is just visible, tucked under the table, clearly meant to be a surprise. The cake at the center reads, "Happy birthday, Gabriel." It's completely untouched. Mike walks past, carefully. His feet carried him to the backstage chica door. It stands slightly open. As he reaches out, the door moves before his hand can touch it, opening with barely a sound. The dark hallway yawns open before him. Mike glances around, but there's nothing to see except the empty room he came from. So after a quiet, deep breath, he continues forward. He rounds a bend and becomes aware of muffled sounds behind a door. He can see that this is a very familiar, employees-only closet. He pauses, unsure what to do, when the door opens and someone steps out, clearly in a hurry. For a second, Mike isn't sure what he's looking at. Then he recognizes the massive rabbit head tucked under the man's arm. The golden rabbit wasn't an animatronic. It was a suit. Or maybe it's a bit of both? The man hurriedly puts the head on the floor and half kicks, half pushes it into the closet, before shutting the door and locking it. The area is too dark to see any of his features, but it's obvious that this is the same obscured man Mike saw in Garrett's flashback. He straightens and shakes himself a bit, clearly trying to gain some level of composure, before he turns and starts walking away. Mike is about to follow, but he's stopped by a familiar click. Time slows as he turns back towards the door. It doesn't open, but he knows it's been unlocked. The message is clear. Garrett wants him to open that door. The world around him fades into darkness as he slowly approaches. Every step is more difficult as dread begins to crawl its way up his throat. The man who just walked away from here is a killer, one who clearly just got interrupted. What is he going to see if he opens this door? Does he even want to know? The cut on Mike's arm twinges and he grips it. As he reaches for the handle, his hand is obviously shaking. His eyes dart around and focus on the floor, where he can see tiny pinpricks of red on the concrete. Blood? As his hand hovers above the handle, he catches sight of something else. The door has a stain on it, a little lower down, and he dully remembers the vision of the red smear on the door. Up close, he can see it for what it is. A child-sized bloody handprint, smeared slightly, like its owner was trying to grab something. No! As Mike pulls away, it's like a spell has been broken. The rest of the hallway snaps into focus, the sound of Mike's racing heart dropping away. No, I can't do this. I can't. Mike continues to stammer as he puts more distance between himself and the door. He takes another step and almost screams as something touches him. He turns and there's Garrett. Garrett's face is twisted in worry and confusion. He gestures for the door and reaches out, trying to grab his brother's hand and lead him forward, but Mike flinches away. Garrett gets more distraught, gesturing insistently at the door. Mike continues to back away, shaking his head. No, this is insane. This is crazy. What was I thinking? I can't do this. Whatever this is, I can't do it. As Mike talks, the desperation on Garrett's face grows. He continues pointing towards the door, eyes pleading. Mike sees this expression and starts to feel desperate himself. He does not want to see what's on the other side of that door. Hey, don't look at me like that. What do you even want me to do? This already happened. I can't fix it. I can't do anything about it. Garrett's desperation shifts, gaining an edge. Clearly, he thinks there is something Mike can do, and he points at the door, insistent. Mike only shakes his head, his fear settling into something defensive. Vanessa was right. I'm in over my head. The area around them begins to darken again, but where before it was only ominous, now there's a distinct feeling of threat to it. Mike doesn't seem to notice as he turns to walk away. Garrett rushes forward, trying to grab his hand again, but Mike pulls away. No! I'm done with this, okay? I don't want to see what's in there. I never wanted to see any of this! I was doing fine before I listened to you. You kept me coming back this whole time. Why? I could have died so many times. I should be dead. Do you understand that? I could have died because of you. You see this? I only got this because I was stupid enough to keep coming back even though I knew your freaky friends were coming after me. I never should have looked into this. I should have left this job the minute something weird happened, but then you came along. It's been years, and I know I can't do anything to change what happened, so why don't you just leave me alone? Mike stands, slightly winded from the tirade. It's only then that he registers the tears running down Garrett's face. His brother stares at him, completely crushed, before turning and disappearing into the dark. The dark and quiet of the hallway is judgmental and oppressive. Mike stands alone, stunned, with the beginnings of shame starting to appear on his face. The employee's only door gives a click as it slowly opens on its own. Standing in the darkness is a child. Though the face is somewhat hidden in shadow, Mike can sense the expression of malicious contempt there, and Mike suddenly has the sinking feeling that he just failed a very important test. The light flickers, and when it returns, it's no longer the child standing there. A nightmarish Freddy looms in their place, far larger than any animatronic Mike has seen, with double rows of sharp teeth and rusted claws tinted red. Mike turns and runs. The hallway he'd been in was one he was familiar with in the real world, but the area has morphed into a twisted labyrinth, intent on confusing and trapping him. The hallways turn sharply and loop back on themselves, seeming to change every time he blinks. The crashing and heavy footsteps of the monstrous Freddy chasing him keep getting closer no matter how fast he goes, and a familiar twisted laugh echoes from all directions. As Mike turns a corner, he's startled by what's at the end of the hall, a door with a glowing exit sign above it, shining like a beacon in the dark. Without thinking, Mike runs for it. As his hand closes on the handle, the entire wall gives way as the Nightmare Freddy waiting behind the door pounces. The ever-present laughter grows louder, gleeful and mocking as the thing lunges. Mike jerks awake in his car, screaming, lashing out at something that isn't there. It's several seconds before he remembers where he is. He sits, breathing ragged, trying to convince himself that he's in the real world again. He reaches for the keys that he dropped on the floor, but stops as he sees just how badly his hands are shaking. He slowly curls up in the driver's seat, head in his hand as he tries to pretend that he can handle what just happened. A wide shot shows just how small he looks, trying to pull himself together as the world moves around him. We cut back to Aunt Jane's house, back in Abby's room. She's created a makeshift blanket for it under the bed, and it's clear she's been there a while. Her face is a mixture of boredom and anxiety. After a few moments of nervously sneaking glances at the door, she pulls out the stuffed tiger and starts talking to it quietly. "Are you sure I have to wait?" When Abby makes the tiger talk, it's clear she's doing an impression of Mike.
"Well, Aunt Jane told us to wait for her, so that's probably what we should do."
But it's been forever. She's never on the phone this long, not even for work.
Adult calls can take a long time. Remember when she had to find someone to fix the window? That call took all day.
I guess. She sounds really mad, though. I think I made a mess.
You trust me, don't you, Abby? I promised it'd be okay, so it'll be okay. I'll keep you safe, no matter what.
I trust you. But maybe...
There's a knock on the door, startling her. Jane asks through the door if she can come in. Outside the room with Aunt Jane, we hear a faint shuffling before Abby says she can come in. When Jane enters, Abby's sitting on the bed with a book open, pretending she's been reading this whole time instead of worrying. Aunt Jane looks like she might attempt awkward small talk, before she decides against it and just starts explaining. She tells Abby she called the school. Aunt Jane was hoping she could get some members of administration on her side to see this bullying dealt with, but, much to her frustration, she hasn't been successful. Abby has abandoned all attempts at looking mature and casual and is listening intently. She hesitantly says she's sorry, and Jane asks her what for. Abby says she doesn't want to cause any problems, and Jane emphatically assures her that she isn't the problem here. It's the school administration refusing to investigate an obvious problem.
So, you're not mad at me?
Of course not. It'd be ridiculous to be angry at you about this. Honestly, how anyone could sit by and let this go on is beyond me. They have a responsibility to every one of their students, and not one of them... Right, anyway. No, Abby, I'm not mad at you. You've done nothing wrong in this situation. I would have liked knowing sooner, but you've told me now, and that's what's important. Unfortunately, we are now in a predicament. Given the conversation I had, things aren't going to change anytime soon. And since I am not putting you in a classroom that endorses that behavior, it seems like our best remaining option is to transfer you to a different school. Abby is staring at her aunt with disbelieving awe in her eyes. Jane doesn't notice as she continues talking. I understand if you have reservations. It would be a big change, and transferring in the middle of the year isn't ideal, but I don't have to go back? What? No, of course not. I just said that. Abby has run around the bed, wrapping her arms around Jane in a hug. Thank you. You're very welcome. Jane clearly isn't someone used to receiving hugs, but she pats Abby's shoulder anyway. Eventually, she clears her throat and pulls back slightly. Abby takes the hint and pulls back, looking up at Jane curiously. Well, I guess that's that, then. How about you go watch some cartoons? We cut to the living room, where Aunt Jane is setting up a VHS tape with several cartoons on it. Abby is comfortable on a blanket in front of the TV with a coloring book and crayons. Once it starts playing, Aunt Jane turns to leave. You're leaving? Yes, I have a bit of work to get done, then I'll be looking at finding you a new school. Oh, okay. Jane leaves the room and starts trying to work, but she can't seem to concentrate. She keeps overhearing the sounds of Abby's cartoon, and she can't help but think about how this happened. She's supposed to be Abby's guardian, but her niece didn't feel like she could trust her enough to tell her about something hurting her. That is clearly eating at Jane. In the living room, Abby is surprised when Jane comes back and starts asking her about what the cartoon is about. As she answers and Aunt Jane continues asking questions and trying to interact with her, Abby shyly says that watching cartoons is more fun when you have someone with you. Jane takes the cue and sits down to watch with her niece. A while later, we see that it's getting late. Abby and Jane look like they've just finished eating dinner together. Jane seems to be considering something before she stands and tells Abby she has a surprise for her. She leaves the room and Abby waits, curiously. Jane returns with a small wrapped box, and the two sit next to each other on the couch. I think I owe you an apology. Jane is holding herself very stiffly, eyes filled with determination to get through what needs to be said. She's clearly someone very unused to apologizing, but she's facing the prospect of being in the wrong as bravely as she can manage. As your guardian, it's my responsibility to make sure you're taken care of. I thought that a private school like this could help you make new friends and recover. Clearly, I was wrong. I'm sorry you didn't feel you could talk to me about it. I never expected to be in the position of raising a child, but that's no excuse. I'll try to do better. You have my word. Abby looks at her intently for a moment, like she's trying to see if Jane means it. She asks Jane to promise that things will get better. Jane replies honestly, saying that hard times are a part of life, but from now on, she'll do everything in her power to take care of Abby. Seeing that her aunt is genuine, Abby surprises Jane with another hug, saying that it's okay, and that she forgives her. She asks if she really doesn't have to go back to school, and Jane snaps out of her shock to hug her back and tell her in no uncertain terms that she's never sending her to a place like that. Abby thanks her, and the earnestness of it rattles Jane a bit, since it drives home just how much pain Abby was hiding. Before Jane can form a response, Abby pulls away and asks what the box is. Jane gives it to Abby and says that she intended it to be a birthday present, but she thought Abby might like to open it now. Abby does, and finds inside a small coin purse. Is this really for me? Yes, you're getting older, so I thought it would be good for you to have a coin purse. I've always wanted my own pencil bag. Jane looks like she wants to correct Abby, but she holds herself back, instead eventually saying that it has many pockets, so maybe Abby could use one of them for coins, in case she's ever caught out of the house and needs to make a call. Abby is intrigued by the possibility, seemingly excited that her new pencil bag has so many uses, and Jane counts it as a win. Jane declares that it's now time for bed. Abby is a little resistant, but she goes along with it easily enough. Jane looks tired when she gets back downstairs. Clearly, all this emotional stuff is new for her, but she seems pleased with herself. As she starts cleaning up, she notices the phone and seems to consider something. We jump from here to Mike's apartment. The sound of the soap opera is playing in the background as several cuts take us through the apartment, showing various cleaning jobs started and then abandoned. In the final cut, Mike is sitting on the couch, holding the same photo of his family we saw him take out of the drawer earlier. The latest rerun of Immortal and Restless Hearts is playing, where Clara is talking about feeling abandoned by the Count, who decided to call off the wedding even though Clara had come to terms with leaving a normal life behind. Mike is holding the old picture carefully, like it might crumble to ash if he's not careful. The flickering TV makes his emotions stark. He looks sad, guilty, and utterly exhausted. His thumb runs over the edge of the picture. He's thinking about the encounter with Garrett, and deeply regretting what he said. It's a regret that's becoming stained with hopelessness. He's managed to ruin yet another relationship by saying something he doesn't mean in the heat of the moment, and he has no idea how he can possibly make this right. The phone rings, pulling Mike back to the present. He stares at it, considering just letting it go, but after a moment he sighs and gets up to answer it. Hello? Hello, Mike. It's Jane. Oh, hey, Aunt Jane. How are you? Jane notices the strange tone, but tries to ignore it as she starts to tell Mike about the day she and Abby spent together. Mike does his best to listen and be involved in the conversation, but he can't summon the energy to sound like himself. After a few lackluster responses, Jane can't handle it anymore. Normally, she'd be annoyed at how distracted Mike seems, but spending the entire day trying to be more emotionally open has her feeling concerned instead. She starts asking him about what's wrong. At first, Mike tries to pretend it's nothing, but he can't keep it up for long. He eventually tells her that he's had a fight with a friend, and he regrets what he said and how he acted, but he doesn't know how he can make things right. He's not even sure if he'll be able to contact this friend again, since they definitely don't want to see him after what happened. This seems to hit close to home with Jane. She's quiet long enough that Mike needs to ask if she's still there. She tells Mike that she knows the feeling of being unable to take back what you said. Before Mike's mother passed, the two had had an argument. They'd always butted heads, but it had been getting worse, and in this particular spat, Jane had ended the conversation saying some very hurtful things. Things that you regret the moment you say them. She remembers swearing to herself that she'd apologize the next time she saw Mary again. That she'd fix it, make it right. She just was going to wait. Then the next morning, she got the call, and her sister was gone. The last thing she ever did with her sister was argue, and Jane regrets that deeply. After taking a moment to collect herself, Jane encourages Mike to try and apologize to his friend. Jane looks at one of the drawings that Abby left at the table and says that you can't fix everything, but saying sorry and trying to do better is a pretty good start. She's sure Mike will regret it if he doesn't try and do something. The call ends with the two saying their goodbyes and Mike promising not to be late to Abby's party tomorrow. After he hangs up, Mike takes a moment to stare at the old picture of his family before looking up, determination on his face. He grabs his work jacket and leaves the apartment. He arrives at Freddy's. The building stands, cold and derelict and unwelcoming. Mike hesitates, but takes a deep breath and approaches. He's resolved now. He's going to speak to his brother again, and as dangerous as it is, he knows this is probably the best way to get his attention. Before he can unlock the gate, he hears the sound of an approaching car. Vanessa's police cruiser pulls into the parking lot at alarming speed, and Vanessa stumbles out, looking frantic. Upon seeing Mike, she looks relieved and rushes over. "Mike, you're okay!" Yeah? Did something happen? What's wrong? I need you to come with me. Right now. I found some new information on Garrett's kidnapping. Wait, what? I did some digging, and I found something new about what happened, but I can't show you here. You need to come with me. We don't have a lot of time. Mike is conflicted, looking between Vanessa and the pizzeria door. He just managed to harden his resolve, and this new development is throwing him off. He tries to stammer something out to ask a question or get his bearings somehow, but Vanessa interrupts. If Mike wants to know what happened to Garrett, what really happened, he needs to come with her, right now. Faced with this ultimatum, Mike agrees and follows Vanessa to the car, sending one more glance back to the pizzeria as he climbs in. Vanessa drives the two of them away, and soon the houses give way to a more rustic area. Mike keeps trying to ask Vanessa questions, but Vanessa insists that they can't talk here. She'll explain when they get there. As they keep going, Mike gets more and more nervous as Vanessa keeps refusing to give him a straight answer. Eventually, she pulls off to the side into a clearing, and tells Mike that this is where it is. Mike climbs out and looks around. Nothing's familiar, and he doesn't see anything that would justify Vanessa driving them out there. The creeping sense of danger he's been feeling the entire drive is almost overpowering now. Something is very wrong. Vanessa, what's going... He crumples to the ground, motionless. We see Vanessa, poised to swing again, but Mike stays still. She slowly lowers the shovel, breathing heavy. She stares at Mike, her eyes a mix of horror and flighty desperation, like this is something she came upon and not something she did. She looks around before reaching down and starting to drag Mike's body back to the car. Mike's eyes snap open. He's lying face down on the forest floor. As he sits up, we see that this isn't the forest from reality. Mike has woken up in the dream forest, in a clearing that's becoming very familiar. Once Mike realizes where he is, the reality of what just happened crashes down on him.
No. Stupid. Oh, sure, get in the car. Go to the middle of the woods. You're so stupid. Gah!
As he goes to stand, a wave of pain goes through his head, almost making him fall again. He looks around, expecting to see someone waiting, but there's no one. He's alone. Mike calls out, trying to see if Garrett is somewhere out there. After a moment, Mike sets off into the trees, his determination returning. This isn't how he planned on getting back to the dream forest, but if his brother is here, the least he can do is try and make things right before it's all over. As Mike starts searching, we go back to Aunt Jane's house. Jane is outside, smoking a cigarette next to the mailbox. It's the first time we've actually seen her smoke in the movie. She looks lost in thought, and not entirely happy that she's smoking at all. After a moment, she starts to have a one-sided conversation, seemingly with the stars. Through the short conversation, though, we realize that she's addressing her sister. She talks about how similar Abby and her sister are, how willing they both are to forgive. Maybe too willing. She wonders if Mike is the same, and if she was just too angry and set in her ways to see that that relationship could be mended. She doesn't know if their fractured family can heal, but she admits to the night air that she wants to try. Her sister's babies deserve to be happy. At that moment, a car comes around the bend. Jane quickly drops the cigarette and grinds it into the gutter, hoping to hide it before whoever it is can manage to see it. But that worry is quickly superseded as the car swerves straight at her. Jane tries to move, but she's not fast enough, and the purple car hits her head on. The camera focuses on Jane's hand where she's fallen. There's silence, then a car door opens and footsteps approach. The hand pulls out of view as the body is dragged away. The shot changes. We see Abby asleep in bed before her hand reaches out and shakes her awake. Abby looks up to find Dave standing over her. She's understandably confused, but Dave explains. He told her he was planning a surprise for Mike, and now it's time for Abby to help. They're going to go surprise Mike at work. Abby is excited by the prospect of seeing her brother, but she's a bit hesitant as well. It's dark out, and Aunt Jane doesn't like it when she stays up late. Dave is quick to explain this, too. They needed to pick a time when Mike would really not expect her to show up, and that's when he's at work. Abby can handle one late night. And don't worry about Aunt Jane. She'll be meeting them there. She and Dave had a talk, and they're working together to surprise Mike. Isn't that fun? Now all they need is for Abby to be there too. Abby is convinced and starts gathering a small bag. Dave is impatient as she does this, but he hides it whenever Abby looks his way. When she's ready, she follows Dave outside to the car. After Abby gets in, she notices something and tells Dave that he needs to go get his car fixed. There's no handles on the inside of the back seat. Dave hems and haws and admits that, yeah, he probably should fix that. Back in the forest with Mike, he's still searching, but he seems to be stuck in a loop. No matter which direction he goes, he always comes back to the same clearing. We see this happen a couple of times, with Mike even running to try and get somewhere else, but no luck. He's starting to get frustrated, but Mike pauses. This is too important for him to lose it. He needs to do this right. He pauses, taking deep breaths and unclenching his hands. When he feels more stable, he starts talking. He understands if Garrett doesn't want to see him. But it wasn't right what he said, and he wants to apologize. For a moment, it seems like nothing has happened. Then, Mike hears a small noise, and he turns. Garrett is sitting in the clearing, facing away. A slight wind passes through the trees, like the place is waiting for Mike's next move. Mike approaches and sits down next to Garrett. Hey, Garrett. Thanks for letting me talk to you. Right. Listen, what I said to you wasn't okay. And I need to tell you I'm sorry. I know what happened there was probably awful. Definitely awful, and I was scared to know about it. I didn't want to think about what happened. So, I took all that fear, and I took it out on you. I was scared, but that's not an excuse. I said that you're the reason that I've been in danger this whole time, but that's not true. You saved me so many times from dying in that place. And in the end, even if you wanted me to, going back was my decision. I did that. So thank you for saving me. And I'm sorry. I think I know what you want from me. I think I get it now. You were trying this whole time to tell me who you were, to tell me it was you. And I didn't want to think it was you. I was so scared of what might be happening, but you just wanted to be seen. You wanted someone to know what happened. Listen, I am terrified of what you want me to see. And I don't know exactly what I'll do. But if you still want me to help you, I want to be there. If you still want me to see what happened, to know what happened, I want to help. Mike extends a hand. Garrett looks at it, then up at Mike for the first time in the conversation. I won't run away. Promise. Garrett looks at Mike, searching his face for some kind of lie, but there's none there. Slowly, he reaches out and takes Mike's hand. Mike braces himself, and Garrett leads the two of them into the trees. They emerge in front of the pizzeria, like always, but this time, they aren't alone. 4 children wait in the front. Mike recognizes them. They were faceless before, but he knows them now. What was once a mystery is clear. They all look at him, expressions ranging from skeptical to curious. Gabriel looks especially incredulous. Mike wants to say something, but what can you say in a situation like this? After a moment of staring, the children seem mostly satisfied and start to file into the building. Freddy glares at Mike with a look that says, "You better not mess this up," then enters as well, closing the door behind him.
You need to wake up.
What? Garrett's voice is still difficult to understand, but he can make out the words easily enough.
Abby will be here soon. You need to wake up. Ask her. She'll tell you the truth.
Okay. Okay, I'll wake up. I'll figure it out. Just... Garrett, Mike kneels down. He knows he doesn't have a lot of time, but there's one more thing that he knows he needs to say. Garrett, I think this might be the last time I see you, and I need you to know I am so sorry for what happened to you. I'm sorry that I left you alone. I'm sorry that that man got you. I'm sorry I wasn't watching. I am so sorry that I let that happen to you.
It's okay. I'm okay now.
As the two embrace, softer colors begin leaching into the sad landscape. They finally break apart, some tears running down both their faces. Okay. Thank you. I'll make it right. I promise. Mike stands, approaching the door. He looks back. Garrett raises a hand towards him. Mike waves back and goes through the door. From here there's a sudden cut. We're back at Aunt Jane's house, and at first, we're not sure why. Then we hear the sound of someone in pain. We see that Dave apparently dumped Aunt Jane down a window well, and although she's badly injured, she's not dead. It takes several tries, but eventually, she's able to escape. As she manages to drag her way inside, she calls out for Abby, but there's no answer. Looking around, she sees that her niece's backpack and shoes are missing. After calling for Abby again and still getting no reply, she reaches for the phone and calls the police, reporting that she's been the victim of a hit and run, and her niece has been kidnapped. Mike wakes up feeling absolutely awful. His eyes can't seem to focus. If he moves, he'll probably throw up, and his head feels like it's actively being split in half. As he sits up and tries to get his bearings, he sees someone else across the room. It's Vanessa, sitting with her head in her hands. When she sees that he's awake, she quickly stands. Mike! Oh my gosh! Oh, I thought I killed you!
What?
Okay, don't worry, it's fine. I'll get you something, hang on. Maybe ice?
What the hell is wrong with you?
Mike tries to stand, and only barely manages to catch himself when his legs give out. Vanessa flinches and starts to move forward and help, but Mike's venomous glare holds her in place. Mike, I think you need to sit down.
Are you serious? You drove me out to the middle of nowhere, hit me with, I don't even know.
With a shovel.
With a shovel? Then kidnap me, take me to wherever this is.
Police supply outpost. Mike stares at her, incredulous. Vanessa shifts, uncomfortable. Mike slowly pushes himself fully upright, shaking slightly. Mike, you have to understand—
Don't come any closer. I don't want to hear anything you have to say unless it's explaining what the hell is going on.
Okay. What do you already know? Vanessa takes a step back, and Mike relaxes slightly. From here, the visuals change. We're still hearing the conversation between Vanessa and Mike, but we're watching as the purple car drives Abby closer to the pizzeria. Mike recounts what he's learned about the children going missing and their spirits haunting the animatronics. Vanessa confirms that it's true, but there's even more to it than that. This kidnapper, this killer, was an awful, horrible man, but he was clever, too. He knew that people would come looking, so he hid the children in a place he knew no one would think to look. As we watch the car park in front of the pizzeria, Vanessa tells Mike that it's not just their spirits in the animatronics. Their bodies are in there too. The visuals come back to the warehouse. Vanessa has paused, and Mike asks her how she knows all of this. Who exactly is this man she's talking about? Vanessa looks pained, then resigned. She pulls out a photo and hands it to Mike. Looking down, he can see what looks like a younger Dave, next to a little girl with long blonde hair. He goes by a lot of names. Every time he needs to, he just makes up a new one. Makes him hard to track. His real name is William Afton, and he's my father. We jump back to Abby and Dave, or rather, Abby and William. He's taken Abby by the hand and is leading her through the dining area, and Abby is starting to get nervous. The whole place is dark and eerie, and she hasn't seen Mike or her aunt. She asks William where they are, and he says that it's just a little further. She just needs to be quiet, not ruin the surprise. Unlike before, this doesn't soothe Abby's nerves. She's starting to realize how little the situation makes sense, and she's getting scared. She stops walking, telling William that she doesn't want to be part of this surprise anymore. William tries again, telling her that it's just a little further. What's the issue? But Abby is vehement. No, she doesn't want to go anymore. At this point, William abandons any nice pretenses and starts dragging Abby towards the back hallway. Abby struggles against it, kicking and yelling to try and get him to let go.
Let me go!
Would you stop making this so difficult? William stops, looking up. Foxy is peeking out of Pirate Cove, staring at the two. William stares back, eyes wide with disbelief and confusion. His eyes flick to the clock. It's barely even 10. There's no way they should be moving yet. Foxy is stock still for a moment, just staring, almost uncomprehending. Then his one eye seems to focus and he screams in rage. William turns and runs, dragging Abby behind him as Foxy leaps off the stage and starts sprinting after them. Foxy is fast, but William manages to reach the office and shut the door just in time. Unlike with Mike, though, Foxy doesn't leave after a few knocks. He slams into the door, repeatedly, his furious screams echoing through the whole building. The lights in the hallway flicker erratically, casting wild and eerie shadows. William stares at the door, eyes wide. He's still gripping Abby's arm, and seeing that he's distracted, Abby takes the opportunity to struggle again. William turns his attention to her just in time for her to bite his arm. He lets go, and Abby kicks him between the legs before running out the other open door. Oh, you little brat! Get back here! Abby's managed to escape, but she has no idea where to go. The pizzeria feels like a maze, and before long she's completely turned around. She manages to find an exit door, but when she tries it, it doesn't move. It's been locked for some reason. Abby hears approaching heavy footsteps and panics, hiding behind some old boxes. From there, she looks out and sees Freddy, stiffly making his way towards the office. As he passes under each hallway light, it flickers to life, brightening to its full extent in seconds before exploding in a shower of glass and sparks. As Abby watches, some of the sparks don't go out when they hit the carpet. One stays glowing, then catches, creating a tiny, glowing ember. This happens to another, then another, and soon tiny flames are spreading out, reaching each other and getting even larger. Freddy takes no notice of this, eyes locked forward with predatory focus. But Abby can see the flames are growing larger, spreading concerningly fast. She slips away, looking for another exit. Finding a way out of here just became a lot more important. Back with Mike and Vanessa, Mike is staring at the photo, face flashing through dozens of emotions. So you knew. This whole time. Garrett. No, not about Garrett. I knew he had other victims, but I didn't know it was your brother. Not until you told me what happened at Sparky's. Mike stares at her, then back at the photo. Your story, it matched what I know he does. But I had to be sure, so I asked him if he killed your brother. That's when I found out about his plan. Plan? What plan? Mike, you have to believe me, I didn't know. Not until a few hours ago. Vanessa, what plan? He's after Abby. He's after both of you. He told me he wanted to complete the set. He'd been following you, trying to find an opening. Vanessa, where's Abby? Mike, Vanessa, where's my sister? Mike, it's okay. It doesn't matter what he does now. Soon, it's all going to stop. What are you talking about? I didn't know about his plan. But he didn't know about mine, either. At this point, Vanessa's demeanor changes. She seems strangely excited, but also increasingly paranoid, like she's telling Mike a secret she swore to take to her grave. She shifts between these feelings as she starts to explain. After the 4 animatronics came back to life, they became her father's new obsession. He started to find new targets, people who were desperate enough to take any work they could find and alone enough that no one would miss them when they disappeared. Then he'd have them work at Freddy's with limited power just to see how long they'd last against his creations. He put Vanessa on cleanup. Once whoever it was had failed to survive, she would go in and clean up what was left. Vanessa doesn't know if this was supposed to be a punishment or if this was some sort of sick attempt to help her understand him. Whatever the reason, Vanessa knew there was no way she could escape, so she looked for openings, ways that she could maybe trick him and find a way out. And eventually, she had an idea. The animatronics, the children inside them, they want revenge for what William did to them, but they could never get it. The spirits could only have control of their new bodies when the normal animatronic programming wasn't active. Since they were never given a proper night mode, they had free reign from midnight to 6. But even then, safeguards in the code stopped them from leaving the building. And so they lash out at anything they can find, unable to ever go after their true target. William knew that the spirits couldn't come after him at any other time, so he felt safe being in the building at any time that wasn't 12 to 6. Vanessa thought if she could just change the time when the animatronics were active, he'd be caught off guard. He'd go in and be completely helpless to whatever revenge they wanted to enact, and she'd be free. For a long time, it was just a dream, an idea that seemed impossible. But then, her dad hired Mike, and started becoming more distracted, paying less attention to her, leaving her free to finally start setting the plan in action. She had no way of getting into the building, but Mike helped her with that. There's a flashback of Mike's first night working, where Vanessa shoulder checked him by the payphone. A new perspective shows Vanessa slipping a hand into his pocket, pulling out the padlock key. My key, on the first night. I didn't lose it. You took it. Yes. We see Vanessa creeping into the pizzeria, looking around fearfully as she makes her way through the building. Vanessa's narration layers on top of the footage. I searched everywhere. I didn't know how much time I had, and I thought maybe I was wrong and there was nothing to find. But then, as past Vanessa is searching through the office, she finds the old stack of animatronic maintenance guides. I found what I needed. I couldn't do it immediately. I had to wait until I knew he'd be there, in person. He told me that he was going to kidnap Abby tonight. I was supposed to get you out of the way, make sure the building was empty when he got there. And it is. Vanessa turned, looking at Mike earnestly. Don't you see, Mike? It's all finally going to be over. You won't be able to hurt us anymore.
Hold on. You're telling me that your crazy murderer dad kidnapped my sister, and she's at Freddy's right now?
Mike, it's okay.
No, it's not. This is so far away from okay. My sister is with a nutjob serial killer in a building full of pissed off ghosts, and no one except us even knows where she is. No one knows where she is. She's a kid. They won't hurt her.
You don't know that!
Mike! Mike abruptly shoves past her, looking around. He starts frantically searching, pushing things around on the desk, and scanning everywhere he can see. What are you doing?
I'm going to save my sister.
Where are your car keys?
Vanessa steps forward, trying to stop him, even as Mike shoves her away. Mike, you can't fight him!
Watch me.
Mike, listen to me! Vanessa grabs his arm, and Mike turns to meet her eyes. There's nothing but fear in them now, and it's a deep fear, one born out of desperation and repeated pain. It's the instinctive fear of a cornered animal that knows it's outmatched in every way, one that knows there's no escape from the danger trapping it. Mike, you can't win against him. This is the best option there is, believe me.
What did he do to you?
Vanessa slowly shrinks, her grip loosening. Eventually, she lets go entirely, wrapping her arms around herself as she turns away. The air grows heavy with words unsaid.
Vanessa, I don't know what's happened to you, and you can do what you want. But I need to leave. I need to save Abby. Please.
Vanessa is still. Then she stiffly walks to a nearby set of drawers. Opening one, she grabs a set of keys and holds it out to him, not meeting his eyes. Mike reaches out and takes them, and Vanessa says something, almost too quietly to hear. "I can't face him. I'm sorry." Mike looks at the keys in his hand, then at Vanessa, who's facing away but hunched over, ashamed. He hesitates, then speaks. "It's okay. I'll figure something out." He feels like there's something else to say, but no words come. Eventually, he reaches out and puts a hand on her shoulder, squeezing gently for a moment. Then he turns and hurries out of the warehouse. Vanessa hears the car start and goes to the door, watching the police cruiser speed away, her face resigned and conflicted. We jump to the pizzeria, in the office with William. Things aren't going well for him. Foxy has stopped banging, but it seems like all the animatronics are surrounding the office now, staring in the windows with eyes that are empty but eager somehow. William isn't doing well under the scrutiny. He's constantly checking the cameras even though he can see everyone through the window, and the rapidly dropping power is making him even more frantic. He shouts at the creatures outside, insulting them every way he can think of, but they're undeterred. Outside, Mike screeches into the parking lot, almost jumping from the car before it comes to a stop. He stares at the building in horror. Dark plumes of smoke are rising from the top, with tongues of flames just barely flickering over the roofline. Mike runs inside, frantically yelling Abby's name. Back in the office, William sees the animatronics turn, curiously and with no small amount of malice. They don't appreciate being interrupted. William can just barely hear something on the other side of the building, and he checks the cameras to find Mike running in, yelling for Abby. The man's face twists in surprise, then distaste. He almost misses it when some of the animatronics start to leave, heading toward the new sound that has appeared. Mike continues his search. The deeper inside he goes, the worse the fire becomes, and he finds it's starting to get hard to breathe with the smoke. We follow him as he weaves through the halls, looking for any sign of his sister. Eventually, finally, he hears a small voice calling back to him, and he enters the kitchen to find her across the room, which is rapidly going up in flames.
Mike!
Abby, I'm right here." They start to run towards each other.
Not so fast.
Seeing Mike preparing to charge forward, William grabs a knife from the counter and holds it to Abby's throat.
You stay right where you are, Schmidt.
Mike freezes, and a cold smile spreads over William's face.
That's right. You just stay all the way over there.
Don't hurt her.
Don't hurt her.
Shut up. Do you hear yourself? This could have been so simple. I had it all planned out. It would have come together so nicely, but no. You had to come along and mess everything up.
He gestures at the building around him. Bits of flaming drywall have started to come off the walls, and the smoke is making it hard to see.
Doesn't matter. I'll kill her, and I'll kill you, and everything will come together again.
Abby starts to cry, tears rolling down her face as she asks why he's doing this.
They didn't do anything to him.
Stop being so dramatic. If you really want to know, you can stick around after I'm done and ask your dear old dad how all of this came to be.
Mike's face twists in confusion, but William carries on before he can get more details.
Enough talking. It's time for you two troublemakers to die. Aw, don't look so sad. You'll both get a chance to say goodbye to each other before you... Ugh!
William's entire body jerks back, blood splattering from his shoulder onto the floor. His grip breaks and Abby runs, reaching Mike and holding onto him tightly. Mike hugs her back, then turns. Vanessa? Vanessa is standing in the doorway, gun held in both hands. She looks desperate and flustered, but as her eyes flick to Mike and Abby, her expression hardens.
I've got this. Go!
Come on, go! Mike picks up Abby and runs past Vanessa out of the room. Once they're gone, Vanessa plants her feet and glares at William, who's slowly getting up from the floor.
Mike runs with Abby, going as fast as he can toward the front entrance. He knows the building better than Abby, but the flames and ash are making it difficult to navigate, even for him. They reach the main dining area, and for a moment it looks like they'll get away, but then Bonnie lurches in front of them, blocking the path. The flaming rabbit reaches forward, and Mike barely manages to pivot out of the way as it lunges.
Mike, over there!
That won't work. All the exits are locked. We'll have to circle around. Back in the flaming kitchen, William has managed to push himself to his feet.
Of all the times you could have chosen to throw a tantrum.
Don't try it, Dad. It's over.
Oh, please. I'll admit, I'm surprised you took the first shot. But we both know you don't have it in you.
The shot goes wide, leaving a gouge in the floor. William is startled. Then he glares.
So that's how it's going to be.
Vanessa doesn't say anything. A close-up on the gun reveals that her hands are shaking. William ducks behind a nearby counter, taking advantage of the smoke that's building in the room. Vanessa steps further in, trying to see where he's gone, even as the heat and ash make her eyes water. William's voice starts to emanate from different directions, causing Vanessa to spin frantically, trying to find the source.
I know this isn't you, Vanessa. You might have the security guard fooled, but I've known you your entire life. I know who you really are.
Shut up! Vanessa takes a shot. It's wild, hitting nothing she wants it to. William laughs. I hate you. I hate what you are. I hate what you made me into.
I'm not going to be part of it. Not anymore.
I didn't make you what you are, Vanessa. You've always been this way.
William lunges from the smoke, grabbing Vanessa's gun arm and pushing them both against the counter. Vanessa's wrist is slammed against the edge, causing her to lose her grip on the gun. William kicks it away, face twisted with malice. Now without a weapon, Vanessa's masked fear is clear on her face.
It was you, wasn't it? You changed the timing on those things. You sent them after me.
He backhands her hard. She backs away from him, almost falling.
You wanted to kill me. Me, your own dad.
He hits her again. The ponytail comes loose, strands falling wildly around her face as she continues to back away.
Oh, but that's not all. You would have let them die too. Sweet little Abby and your new friend. As long as I was gone, you wouldn't have batted an eye.
No! William lifts his hand again and Vanessa flinches. He scowls, bending down to retrieve the knife.
Face it, Vanessa. At the end of the day, you're just like me.
Vanessa stands, half crouched, just barely supporting herself on the counter. Her head is ducked, hair forming a curtain in front of her face. She's shaking slightly.
I'm the only one who understands you, Vanessa. We don't care about anything but ourselves. Do you think anyone else will understand that? What kind of life do you think you can have when this is all over?
As he's talking, the camera focuses on Vanessa's shaking hand. It tenses, then clenches into a fist. Vanessa lifts her head slightly and we catch a glimpse of her narrowed eyes, green slits brimming with righteous, toxic hatred. As he starts to speak again, she lunges forward at him. William is caught off guard and moves on instinct, flipping the knife around and driving it into her stomach. It's difficult to tell which of them is more surprised. Dad. Vanessa falls back, crumpling to the floor. William stares without seeing, his eyes blank, empty.
You. Look what you made me do. Look what you've done. Why couldn't you just do what I told you to?
Vanessa doesn't answer from where she's curled up on the floor, trying to slow the bleeding. William turns away, scowling.
Fine.
He cleans some of the blood off the knife with his fingers, wiping it on his shirt in disgust.
If you want something done right, you have to do it yourself.
No!
Vanessa slams into him and they both crash to the floor. He shoves her off and jumps to his feet, but Vanessa does the same. He attacks, but she dodges. The two swing at each other. William has a knife, but Vanessa is running on something else now. Face twisted in fury, eyes filled with rage and bitter, blood-stained spite. She lunges. Impossibly fast, she grabs his arm and slams it on the counter. The knife topples to the floor. William wrenches himself free, falling back a step.
Vanessa, I told you to shut up!
Her fist crashes into his face. His head snaps to the side, glasses flying off and cracking on the floor. He catches himself, and for the first time, there's a flicker of unease on his face. Vanessa bends down, grabbing the knife from the floor. I hate you. But you're right about one thing. You didn't make me what I am. I decide what I'm going to be, and I am never letting you hurt anyone ever again! Vanessa attacks. The knife flashes. William is fully defensive now, backing away and dodging as best he can, but Vanessa is a force to be reckoned with. He takes a slice on the arm, but it catches the edge of his shirt. Then he nearly falls as the blade goes straight for his eye, and he's forced to jump backward. His back hits the counter edge, and he's forced to jump again as Vanessa embeds the knife in the space where he just was. William stares as Vanessa yanks the knife free, turning to glare at him with venomous intent. He takes an instinctive half-step back, then another. The fire in the room has grown, leaving Vanessa wreathed in flickering red light, pungent black smoke. Her own blood has smudged across her face and covered both hands. Vanessa takes a step forward, and the edge of the knife catches the light as she stares at him with single-minded, predatory malice. William turns and runs. There's a flicker on Vanessa's lips, a brief moment of triumphant satisfaction, before she focuses again and starts after him. Before she can get far, she falters. With William on the run, the fire inside that was keeping Vanessa going has started to burn low. She manages to make it to the hallway before she slumps against the wall, strength leaving her even as she struggles to keep going. Her vision of the burning hallway blurs, then darkens. Something she can't identify just barely coming into view before her eyes slip shut. Mike has made the run around with Abby, circling back to the main entrance. Once again, it seems clear, but then Chica appears in the way, and Mike is only barely able to avoid her swiping hand. The heat of the flames have started to melt the chicken's head, causing the fabric and plastic to melt and peel away. As Mike staggers away, his darting eyes spot a path, and he has an idea. He ducks around Chica's grasping arm and makes a beeline down a hall for a door that he recognizes. The two enter an old supply closet. The fire itself hasn't entered here yet, but there's heavy smoke in the air that shows that it won't be long. Mike sets Abby down and starts barricading the door.
Mike, what are you doing? We're gonna be trapped in here.
No, we're not. Mike looks up and sees the set of small windows. Just as he remembered, they're too small for an adult, but they just might be big enough for a kid. Mike picks up an old chair and smashes the window. He yanks off the security jacket and starts brushing pieces of broken glass off the windowsill. Abby looks at the shuttering door fearfully. Abby, listen. There's a phone attached to the side of the building. I need you to get out of here, and I need you to get to that phone and call the police. Tell them you're at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Make sure they know that.
What about you?
I'll be fine. Come on, let's go. Mike spreads the jacket over the windowsill, covering any glass shards that he missed. Abby is still unsure, and Mike kneels down so they can see eye to eye. Abby, I promise I'll be fine. Abby swallows, then nods. Mike lifts her up, and she's able to just barely fit through the hole he's made and drop to the ground outside.
Mike?
Get to the phone, Abby. Go! There's a heavy crash, and Mike turns to see Chica's fist sticking through the mangled door. It pulls back, and he can see her face. The heat has gotten worse, and one of her eyes now dangles out of the socket, the melted wires only barely keeping it attached. Mike starts looking around for any form of escape for himself. There are no doors, but the smoke has to be coming from somewhere. He spots the edge of a large vent hidden behind some boxes and makes a run for it. He struggles with the bolts for a second, but the frame is flimsy, and he manages to rip the cover free just as Chica breaks the rest of the way into the room. He pulls his shirt over his mouth and squeezes into the smoke-filled vent, praying that it actually leads somewhere and he's not about to tragically suffocate himself. Outside, Abby has run around the building and found the payphone. She tries it, but it won't connect. Realizing her mistake, she digs in her bag and finds the coin purse her aunt gifted her. Slipping in a few quarters, she gets the phone working. 911, what is your emergency?
I need help.
Back inside, Mike finds that the vent has led somewhere. He kicks the cover off and emerges in the hall leading to the main entrance. Nearly the entire building is engulfed in flames now, and Mike has to jump to one side as part of the ceiling crashes to the floor. He stumbles toward the front entrance, and again, stops. In front of him stands the golden Freddy from the employees' only room. It's slightly see-through and seems to flicker in and out of sight, like it's struggling to maintain form. It stares at him, then slowly lifts one arm, pointing. Mike takes only a second to understand, then runs in that direction. The golden Freddy vanishes behind him. Mike runs in the direction Garrett pointed, watering eyes trying to scan and find what his brother wanted him to see. His foot catches on something and he's sent sprawling. When he looks up, he sees Vanessa's collapsed body, unmoving.
Vanessa! Hey, Vanessa!
Vanessa doesn't respond, so Mike loops an arm over her shoulders and starts half dragging, half carrying her back to the entrance. They make it to the dining area and start to move across, but as before, Mike is forced to stop. Freddy bars the way. The bear seems to have mostly escaped the flames, but there are still signs of it. Wispy smoke leaks from the robot's joints, parts of it charred and blackened. It stares at Mike and Vanessa with narrowed eyes, calculating. The other animatronics begin to emerge, behind Mike and on stage, all in various states of destruction from the blaze. Mike can't do anything but watch helplessly, and try to keep the both of them upright as the robots stare. Outside, Abby is still on the phone with the operator, who's reassuring Abby that the fire department will be there any minute. "Just stay on the line with me, okay, honey? Okay." The operator starts talking again, but Abby is distracted by a scuffling sound. She looks up and freezes in horror as she sees William stumble into view. He stands, half-hunched, fresh and half-dried blood soaking from the bullet wound down through his shirt. There's a wicked bruise forming on his face, and his eyes are wild and desperate. They flick around like a cornered animal before coming to rest on Abby.
You...
William starts lurching forward, fingers curling like hooked claws, face a mask of hatred. The operator asks what's wrong, trying to get Abby to respond, but she can't get any words out. She can only stand, frozen in terror. William begins to reach forward, but stops. Off in the distance, he can hear a sound he's come to dread. Sirens. He looks up and sees in the distance the flashing lights of a police car. Following close behind is a fire truck and ambulance, with another police car bringing up the rear. All of them are headed towards Freddy's at high speed. His face twists into an ugly snarl. He twitches slightly, like he still wants to strike, before defeat sets in and he sends Abby a poisonous glare. He shuffles to his car as quickly as he can manage and speeds away, kicking up dust and gravel as he flees the scene. Back inside, Freddy has continued to stare. Mike looks back, and when he sees that Freddy is not attacking, he tries to steel himself. Freddy continues to watch them a moment, eyes narrowed, before he blinks, and his body straightens slightly. He steps to the side, heavy, shambling footsteps, clearly telegraphed. The bear stops and looks back at Mike, expectant. It seems that whatever Gabriel was looking for, he managed to find it in Mike's face. Mike starts forward, carrying Vanessa as best he can. The building groans around them, signaling that there isn't much time, but Mike still finds himself pausing as he passes by the robot. After a moment, he speaks.
I won't forget what happened to you. To any of you. I promise.
Mike breaks eye contact and continues toward the door. The animatronics watch him go, and even in the midst of all the fire and the smoke, it feels like something in the air has finally eased. Smoke pours out of the front door as Mike exits. The outside world feels strange and far away. He manages to get the two of them out as authorities begin to arrive. Paramedics move Vanessa to a stretcher, and a firefighter asks Mike something, but he can't seem to understand. Cutting through the fog of his mind, he hears Abby call his name. He turns just in time to catch her as she crashes into him, holding on tight and not letting go. Mike clings back, finally able to understand the firefighter when they repeat the question. "Sir, is there anyone else in the building?" Mike hesitates, glancing at the old pizzeria, then at Vanessa being loaded into an ambulance.
No, it was just us.
Behind him, the building groans loudly. He looks in time to see the roof cave in, sending out a wave of heat and smoke. The fire flares with the sudden advent of oxygen, and the firefighters rush forward to get it under control. As Mike watches, something shimmers into focus in the wreckage. The phantasmal image of Golden Freddy takes form, warping slightly from the heat. The form flickers, and in its place stands Garrett, looking back at Mike. He raises the hand and gives a small wave. Mike slowly lifts the hand and waves back. When he blinks, Garrett is gone. From here we fade into a segment from a local news network. The two reporters talk about how, in a dramatic series of events, an old missing children's case seems to have been solved. They go briefly over what happened at Freddy's, showing the audience what the public believes occurred. The story is that Mike got suspicious of his strange job, and when he started poking around, William kidnapped Abby from Aunt Jane's in an attempt to blackmail him. Mike was able to convince Vanessa, his daughter and accomplice, to turn on him, and he lit the building on fire in an attempt to hide what evidence was left. Luckily, the police had been put on high alert after Jane had reported Abby missing, and were able to arrive quickly with fire services and paramedics after Abby made her own call. Subsequent investigation of the building revealed that there was a lot to hide, as severely degraded human remains were found in the old animatronics. This aligns with Vanessa's testimony, who has cooperated with authorities and provided additional evidence of William murdering several of his previous employees in the same building. William Afton has not been apprehended, but police are confident they'll soon have him in custody. The reporters encourage anyone who sees William to report it immediately, and they hope that Mike Schmidt and his family are given some privacy as they recover from this ordeal. Near the end of the report, it becomes diegetic, playing on a TV. Someone switches it off, and as they get up and stretch, we can see that it's Mike. He's in Aunt Jane's living room, and it's a sunny day outside. His injuries have mostly healed, and he looks calm and relaxed. He checks his watch, then heads to the kitchen. Jane is sitting at the table, reading a copy of Parenting with Love and Logic. She's still clearly recovering from the attempted vehicular manslaughter, but she still manages to look prim, even with a broken leg propped up on a chair. "Hey, I'm headed out to see Vanessa." "Oh, well, have fun, then." "Wow, very convincing." "I'm trying to be polite. Listen, I think it's very sweet that you're going to see her, and I'm glad you're there to be a good influence in her life. I just don't think that's a place you should spend too much time in." "Okay, whatever you say." "Oh, hush, you know what I mean." "Well, if you're going to go, don't stay too long. You still need to pick up your sister." "Yeah, I know, I got it." As Mike leaves, Jane keeps calling out to remind him of things, mostly to stay safe and not drive too fast, and do you think it might rain? You should take an umbrella. Mike accepts this good-naturedly, saying that yes, he'll stay safe, and no, he won't drive too fast, and no, he'll be fine, really. He seems fairly used to Aunt Jane's new mother-hen attitude, and eventually he's able to head out. He arrives at a county jail and checks in as a visitor. His easy manner and small talk with the guards show that he's been here a few times before. Eventually, he gets inside and to the visitor's room. "Hey, Vanessa." "Hey, Mike. I like the shirt." "Thanks." "I like the hair." "Oh, thanks. It's just something I'm trying out. Figured it was time for a change." The two exchange pleasantries and news. Abby is apparently loving the new school they managed to find for her, and Aunt Jane has been getting into self-help books. He tells Vanessa that Jane wants him to stay with her and Abby until they can find an apartment that meets Jane's standards, which Mike is pretty sure is never going to happen. He thinks that maybe she blames herself for the whole thing, since Mike only took the job because she gave him that ultimatum, and this might be part of her trying to make up for that. For Vanessa's part, she's been doing her best to figure out what she wants to do. She started seeing the prison's guidance counselor, who quickly recommended her to a qualified therapist who can come by sometimes to do sessions with her. She's probably going to be here a while, so she has plenty of time to try things and figure out who she is now that her father isn't looming over her. All in all, everyone is still adjusting, but things are getting better. There's a lull in the conversation, and Mike gets a bit more serious. "Hey, Vanessa?"
when he had Abby and was threatening us, he said something. He said that he was doing all this, kidnapping Abby and hiring me because of my dad. Do you have any idea what he could have meant? Did he ever mention anything about us or my father? No, I don't think so. As far as I can tell, all those people, all those kids, he did it because he could. He likes feeling powerful. I didn't think he ever needed a reason other than that. If he said that to you, I don't know what he meant by it. I'm sorry. Okay, got it. So, they haven't found him yet? I haven't been watching the news. It makes me anxious. No, they haven't. Sorry I brought it up. Mike, it's a fair question. I've told you before, I'm an open book. You can ask me anything about this. Yeah, thanks. Anytime. Mike's watch begins to beep. He turns it off, checking the time. Time for you to head out? Yeah, I need to pick up Abby. Same time next week? Yeah, sure. Mike, thank you for coming to see me. I know I've hurt you. I've hurt a lot of people, and if someone did all that to me, I don't even know how I'd respond. So, really, thank you. I appreciate it. You're welcome. It's really nice to be able to talk to someone who was there and knows about everything that happened. It's good to have a friend. Besides, it's like Jane says, this is my opportunity to be a good influence on the dark denizens of society. Oh, ha ha. Go pick up your sister. See you later, Vanessa. See you, Mike. We check in with Abby and see the new school she's attending. It's a much brighter and happier looking place, and it's currently in the middle of carpool. Abby is coloring with a group of girls outside while they wait. One of them asks if there was really a rabbit on fire chasing Abby and Mike when they got away from the bad guy. Abby says yes, and the girl protests that wasn't on the news. Abby rolls her eyes. Obviously, they couldn't tell the news about it. They would never have believed it. The other girls agree that makes sense. Before the teacher calls Abby over, her brothers arrived. The two meet out front, with Mike waving to the teacher as they leave. Abby starts pulling Mike along to the car.
Mike, come on!
I'm sorry, are we in a hurry?
I need to get home so I can ask Aunt Jane if I can go to Emma's birthday party.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, she's having a pool party, and I have to go. She's getting a bounce house, Mike. A bounce house.
Well, I guess that is pretty important. Although, you do know if you spend too long at a bounce house, gravity doesn't work when you get out.
What? You're lying.
No, it's true. You bounce so much your body forgets how to stay on the ground. And when you leave, you just float away.
That is so not true.
Fine, don't believe me. But it's gonna be your own fault when you end up on the moon. Don't worry. When it happens, I'll tie a string around your ankle, carry you around like a balloon. The teasing conversation continues from there as the camera zooms out and the screen fades to black.
And that was my reimagined version of Five Nights at Freddy's, the movie. I really hope you enjoyed. This was a massive project, and I'm going to do my best to not do anything of this scale for a long time afterwards. But if you enjoyed, be sure to leave a comment below, and who knows, maybe in the future we can look at making another one of these things. Thank you all again for watching, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye!
And you know, I've been reading this series since I was a little kid, and at some point you have to think, like, is it ever going to end? And what happens when it does? This is such a big part of my identity, and where do I even go from here? No, I get it. This has become such a big part of my life, and I honestly don't know where I'd be without it. Sometimes I just wonder if I need to let it all go, you know? I mean, you could, if you don't want to theorize as much. Yeah, that's true. I just get so into it. I hope I don't freak you guys out. What? No, not at all, man. I know I can get kind of intense about this stuff, and it can be a lot. So, thank you guys for just letting me talk about it. Of course. I argue with you all the time, but it's all in good fun, you know? At the end of the day, we're all enjoying the same silly series, and I like that. Yeah, me too. I like that I've gotten to meet you guys. I still don't know what's going on, but it's nice that we all get to talk about it together.
Excuse me, gentlemen? The library's about to close. Will you be much longer?
Oh, I think we're almost done. Yeah, it'll be just a few minutes.
Right. Hop to it.
So, same time next week? Yeah, I could do that. My schedule's pretty open. I'll be here. Awesome. Do you guys ever think the movie's gonna come out? Oh, no way. Not a chance.